Chapter 262. Long Houchen had just completed his advancement. Coupled with the brief devouring of King Easton's life domain, he felt that he was in an unprecedentedly powerful state. However, the heart of eternity in his chest continued to beat, as if it was recovering its spiritual power. "Human, why have you entered my territory?" King Easton's voice was still as deafening as ever, inversely proportional to his size. Long Houchen said in a low voice, "King Easton, you bullied the weak for your own selfish desires. You even committed the sin of exterminating your entire race. Today, you will pay the price." As he spoke, Long Houchen clasped his hands above his head. The aria of the goddess of light and blue rain, hibiscus of light, had already fused together. Dazzling rainbow light instantly rose, and his light god's domain rippled outward like water. Bullsh *T. King Easton cursed. He swung his axe and hammer at the same time. Immediately, his aquamarine life domain transformed into countless plants in the air, charging towards Long Houchen's light god's domain. The aquamarine light entered the rainbow light, and the result was the same as before. The aquamarine light only boosted the rainbow light's power. The power of Long Houchen's light god's domain instantly increased, and the speed at which he charged out became even faster. How can this be? King Easton was shocked. He quickly retracted his domain and leaped towards Long Houchen. It was extremely rare for a domain to completely restrain another. This would only happen when two domains were mutually restraining each other to the extreme. However, Long Houchen's domain and King Easton's domain were not simply restraining each other. They also had complementary characteristics. King Easton's life domain could be said to be the best fuel for Long Houchen's light god's domain. In just a moment, the strength of Long Houchen's domain had already surpassed his control. Faced with King Easton's attack, Long Houchen showed no fear at all. He held the swords of life and creation with both hands and slashed down. It was the Shura slash. The Azura slash was not the same as before. Not only did it contain the power of Long Houchen's domain, but it also contained his comprehension of sword intent and sword soul. A rainbow-colored light descended from the sky, and the entire mountain was filled with a murderous aura. At this moment, Long Houchen exuded an unprecedented majesty. As soon as the emerald light around King Easton's body came into contact with Long Houchen's sword light, the rainbow light on it immediately weakened, as if it had melted. Even the divine artifacts in his hands were greatly affected. However, King Easton's spiritual power was far stronger than Long Houchen's. With a loud roar, he separated his weapons. Immediately, Long Houchen's sword intent was torn apart by a terrifying force. At the same time, he closed in, and the axe in his right hand collided with Long Houchen's swords of life and creation. A look of shock appeared on Long Houchen's face. He had never thought that a person, or rather, any living creature, could possess such terrifying power. He was even certain that even the Demon Emperor could not possess such strength in terms of power. However, the swords of life and creation were only slightly touched. In the next moment, Long Houchen's entire body was flung away like a cannonball, and he crashed into the wall in the distance. The stone walls in the belly of the mountain were extremely hard, but even so, when Long Houchen's body collided with them, the jade-green fragments scattered in all directions, and he forcefully smashed a large hole in the wall. With Long Houchen's 9th-tier, 3rd-rank cultivation, coupled with the suppression of his opponent's domain and sword intent, he did not expect such an outcome when facing King Easton's power. The heart of eternity beat violently, but Long Houchen could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He felt as if his body had been crushed by a huge boulder. There was no part of his body that did not hurt, especially his arms, which did not feel like his own. The swords of life and creation had completely split after that instant of contact, turning back into two heavy swords. Moreover, they were covered in fine cracks, as if they were about to shatter. Although Long Houchen's body was rapidly recovering, how was he supposed to continue fighting like this? No wonder even his pet had such great power. No wonder he had such terrifying snores despite his short stature. It turned out that his power was terrifying. King Easton's smug voice rang out, "Haha, I have the bloodline of the Titan King. In terms of power, even a god can only bow down before me." Just as he was feeling smug, dense rainbow light slowly drifted out from the hole that Long Houchen's body had created. Compared to before, the rainbow light was even more intense, and it was emitting a soft, buzzing sound in a strange trajectory. The rainbow light swirled, and the light seemed to be spinning rapidly. In the next moment, Long Houchen had reappeared in midair. Taking a deep breath, Long Houchen stared at King Easton with a burning gaze. "Since I can't fight you in terms of power, I can only use my domain." In the next instant, Long Houchen seemed to have turned into a sun. 7-colored golden light burst out and instantly illuminated every corner of the mountain. King Easton was not spared either. Although he had terrifying power, he was completely suppressed by Long Houchen in terms of attributes. As the rainbow light enveloped him, King Easton could clearly feel his spiritual power being sucked away at an alarming rate. Of course, he could not use his domain at this moment. That would only speed up the rate at which his cultivation was being devoured by the light god domain. Only by attacking the enemy's weakness and defeating Long Houchen could he remove the threat of the light god domain. King Easton roared furiously. The giant hammer in his right hand suddenly flew out of his hand, flying towards Long Houchen like a huge green meteor. Long Houchen smiled calmly and said, "In terms of power, even 100 of me may not be your match. However, your domain has been completely suppressed by me. Without the weakening and counteracting effect of the domain, no matter how powerful you are still a non-domain realm master." As he spoke, the giant hammer had already swept past his body. However, it only shattered an afterimage. The giant hammer flew through the air. Just as it was about to touch the cave wall, it drew an arc in the air and returned to King Easton's hand. Inside the cave, King Easton could only see rainbow gold. The light god domain allowed him to see only rainbow colors. The cave seemed to have disappeared, and everything around him was rainbow. Just as Long Houchen said, without a domain, a normal cultivator would not stand a chance against a domain master. Just the dominating nature of the domain was enough to render him powerless. King Easton fell silent. His brown eyes shone with a dazzling light. The giant weapons in his hands were sheathed by his side. He was trying to sense Long Houchen's location. However, he quickly realized that it was useless. In Long Houchen's domain, all he could sense was light. He could not even detect a trace of soul presence. Long Houchen was currently hidden in the light god domain, rapidly healing his body. At the same time, his brain was working at high speed. If not for the absolute suppression of the domain, even the strongest human on the Holy Demon Continent, Holy Star Knight Yang Haoyu, would not be a match for King Easton. His power was just too terrifying. In his domain, the life force was so pure. Fortunately, Long Houchen's light god domain had evolved and gained the ability to control the process of life, allowing it to fuse with life force. Otherwise, he would have no choice but to escape. Under the influence of the light god domain, his spiritual power was greatly reduced. No matter how strong his physical strength was, without the support of spiritual power, he could only be slowly tortured to death by Long Houchen. The King of Easton's eyes were filled with reluctance. This battle had been too frustrating. He had never thought that someone's domain could restrain his domain so much. It should be known that his life domain possessed the powerful ability to control the life force of all animals and plants. Once enveloped by his domain, the enemy's life force would be rapidly sucked away. Coupled with his extraordinary strength, there had never been anyone in the world of Easton who could pose any threat to him. However, things did not go as he wished. He had encountered great trouble today. His life dominion, which he had always been so proud of, was like dry wood meeting a raging fire against Long Houchen's evolved light god domain. Then, the dry wood could only be ignited. King Easton roared furiously at the sky. The life force on his body immediately erupted like a geyser. The life dominion that he had previously hidden was unleashed once again. Although it was like quenching thirst with poison, this was the only way he could discover Long Houchen's location through the collision of their domains. In a flash, King Easton's speed was instantly raised to the limit. At the same time, the weapons in his hands flew out at the same time, covering the area where Long Houchen was. The two god weapons flew towards Long Houchen at high speed. However, just as they were about to come into contact, they turned at the same time and collided with each other. A terrifying boom erupted, and a thick layer of emerald lightning scattered in all directions, covering an area of at least 300 square meters. Let's see where you can run now. You've been hit by my lightning. Even if your domain can suppress mine, you'll still be paralyzed and shaken. King Easton realized something was wrong as soon as he said that. This was because he discovered that Long Houchen's figure had disappeared. Moreover, the light god domain was rapidly fusing with his life dominion. No, that's impossible. King Easton caught the two god weapons that flew back to him in confusion. His face was filled with disbelief. Long Houchen's voice rang out from all directions. There's nothing impossible about that. Not only is my domain superior to yours and suppresses you, but my spiritual energy is also stronger than yours. As a result, even when our domains collide, I can suppress your senses so that you won't be able to find the real me. Although that was what he said, Long Houchen was still shocked. The power of the collision between the two god weapons was too terrifying. If he had really been within that range, he might not have died, but he would have been completely restricted or even sealed. King Easton would have been able to turn the tables and win the battle. King Easton was indignant, but he had no choice but to quickly retract his life dominion. If he did not, his spiritual energy would only be consumed even more. Meanwhile, the power of Long Houchen's domain continued to increase. Even the speed at which his life dominion was melting was increasing. Do you believe that I can use all of Easton's life force to burst your domain? King Easton raised the god weapons in his hands and threatened. Long Houchen smiled. You can try. Don't you think that if you really do that, you'll be melted before my domain bursts? King Easton was immediately speechless. He was truly indignant. He knew that his opponent was weaker than him, but he still could not defeat him. It was an uncomfortable feeling. Of course, he could also escape with the life dominion's protection. However, as the king of Easton, how could he continue ruling Easton if he gave up his territory and ran away? Just as King Easton was enraged, the rainbow light around him suddenly receded. Long Houchen's true form appeared. After a period of recuperation, the damage for being sent flying had already healed. Moreover, because he had devoured a large amount of life force to replenish his domain, not only did the light dominion not consume Long Houchen's spiritual energy, it even fed back to him, allowing him to recover most of his spiritual energy. King Easton's expression was very ugly. Of course, only he could feel it. Long Houchen could only see the beard on his face, but he could still see the extreme indignation in King Easton's eyes. Human, did you come here just to humiliate me? King Easton growled. Against him, Long Houchen was clearly undefeatable. Although he had retracted his domain, King Easton knew that he did not have the ability to kill Long Houchen instantly. At the same time, he could not do that, just like how he could sense that Long Houchen would not kill him either. Long Houchen shook his head and said, "Of course not. I was invited here by someone to deal with you. She told me that you killed all her clansmen for the sake of seizing her treasures, and you even captured her family. I came here this time to help her rescue her family. Bullsh asterisk T. I'm the representative of the master of nature in the human world. I'm the embodiment of nature and the will of life. How could I do such a thing? Although you have the heart of light and the glory of the supreme light, you cannot humiliate me. I'm the child of the master of nature." King Easton was furious. He clapped the terrifying god weapons in his hands together. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something and hurriedly asked, "Who is this person you mentioned just now? I want to know who dares to slander the representative of the master of nature and slander the great King Easton." Just as Long Houchen was about to speak, the entire cavern suddenly shook violently. Then, An indescribably powerful force came from the cavern Cece had entered. It was also the power of life, but this power was not the power to create life, but the power to destroy life. Sensing the appearance of this aura, King Easton immediately paled. However, he did not take any action. It was as if he was extremely afraid of the power to destroy life. He quickly retreated to the side and even hid behind Longhouchen. At this moment, a white figure emerged from the cavern. As soon as she appeared, the power to destroy life was immediately unleashed. The terrifying wave of spiritual energy pressed Longhouchen and King Easton against the stone wall in the distance. However, they quickly adapted to this power and immediately flew back into the air. King Easton stared at Longhouchen in shock and anger. You actually had someone sneak into the forbidden area and steal the seed of the Tree of Destruction? Do you know that this will destroy the balance of the entire world of Easton? It will even turn all the creatures in Easton into nothingness. The white figure who had appeared in a flash was naturally Cece. At this moment, she was holding an extremely strange stone in her right hand. The stone looked very strange. Half of it was gold and the other half was silver, and it gave off a faint glow of gold and silver. At the point where the gold and silver intersected, a small sapling emerged. The sapling was faint purple in color, with faint purple spots on it. The tremendous power to destroy life that Longhouchen had sensed earlier actually came from this sapling. Without a doubt, this was the seed of the Tree of Destruction that King Easton had mentioned. Cece, did you save your family? Longhouchen asked. Cece raised her head to look at Longhouchen and King Easton. She was also slightly taken aback. She asked in return, "Why didn't you lure him away?" Longhouchen replied, "My domain just happened to counter him, so I defeated him. Naturally, I don't need to lure him away anymore. You still haven't answered my question." Cece smiled sweetly. "It's fine. That's not important anymore. Brother Long, thank you for helping me obtain the seed of the Tree of Destruction. From now on, I'm the ruler of the world of Easton. I will grow alongside the Tree of Destruction until this place becomes my celestial realm of destruction. I didn't expect you to be so powerful that you could even defeat King Easton. But since you've defeated him, why didn't you kill him along the way? That's fine too. Let me do it myself." King Easton was instantly enraged when he saw Cece. "It's you. So it's you, Queen Yi. What are you trying to do? So you stole the sun and moon divine stone for the seed of the Tree of Destruction. Are you trying to destroy the world of Easton?" Longhouchen was stunned when he heard the name Yu Yi. He couldn't help but think of Yu Yi, who was far away in the demonic capital. It had been so many years since they last met. He wondered how she was doing. However, the Demon Emperor had said that he wouldn't harm her. Was she doing well? Cece sneered. "Shorty, if you hadn't forced us Yu Yi clan into a corner, why would I take such a risk? The moment I planted the Tree of Destruction in the sun and moon divine stone, I've already changed my faith. King Easton, I might not be able to kill you today, but when the Tree of Destruction matures, you'll be my first target." Longhouchen frowned slightly. He looked at Cece and said calmly, "Cece, this doesn't seem to be what you said. Looks like you're not here to rescue your family." Cece looked at Longhouchen with a complicated expression. She sighed softly and said, "Brother Longhouchen, I'm sorry. I lied to you, but I had no choice. You're too kind and trusting too easily. However, it's worth it for me to use you. You're so handsome, but it's a pity that you've inherited the light's legacy. Don't worry, once I've completely fused with the Tree of Destruction, I'll definitely find you the best tomb. Of course, if you're willing to give up your faith in the light and follow me to comprehend the mysteries of darkness, not only will I not kill you, I'll even marry you and become your wife. After all, outstanding humans like you are too rare." As she spoke, Cece's body began to change. Her ears became pointy, and her black hair slowly fluttered in the wind, becoming more twisted, spreading out behind her like a huge black wave. 3 pairs of translucent, but faintly black wings unfurled. Her stunning features gained an additional mysterious allure, and her aura skyrocketed. Although she wasn't as powerful as King Easton, she was at least a domain expert. Cece's voice was no longer as gentle as before. Cece's voice was no longer as gentle as before. Instead, it was filled with pride as she said, "Let me reintroduce myself. I am the controller of darkness and water, the Moonlight Queen of Easton, the chief of the Dark Night Elves. My people have been gradually forced to extinction by you humans and the elves. If I don't do something, my entire race will be wiped out. So, what I said to you before wasn't all a lie. As for my parents and relatives, they don't exist. As the Moonlight Queen, I'm the supreme controller of darkness, so I don't need any blood relatives." Hearing her words, Long Houchin stared at her silently, but his expression didn't change much. King Easton roared and clashed the two god weapons in his hands. The Life Dominion immediately shone brightly with aquamarine light. He said, "Queen Yuyi, do you think you can still leave today?" Queen Yuyi Cece smiled and said, "Can't leave? In the past, you might have had a chance to keep me here, but now..." As he spoke, he slowly raised the Tree of Destruction in his hand. A thick aura of darkness, accompanied by coldness, was quickly injected into the divine stone of sun and moon. Immediately, a terrifying pressure several times stronger than before burst forth, suppressing King Easton's life dominion so much that it rapidly shrank. The Tree of Destruction is the companion of the Tree of Eternity, and the Tree of Eternity is the home of the Master of Nature. Although you're the spokesperson of the Master of Nature, how can you fight against the Tree of Destruction? Even if the Tree of Destruction has only just sprouted, your power isn't enough to stop me from leaving." With a flash, Long Houchin appeared in front of King Easton. Seven-colored light instantly blossomed, protecting King Easton's life dominion behind it. The destructive aura of life from the Tree of Destruction did not suppress his light dominion as much as it did his life dominion. At least, Long Houchin did not retreat. The two domains clashed against each other, producing faint sounds. A hint of resentment appeared on Cece's face. "Brother Dragon, are you going against me?" Long Houchin frowned slightly. "Looks like I was wrong." Cece giggled. "What's the point of knowing now? A goody two-shoes like you will always be at a disadvantage. Consider my suggestion. Follow the darkness, and I'll let you stay by my side forever. You'll be second only to me, but above everyone else." Long Houchin shook his head gently. "Although I was wrong, it wasn't too ridiculous. A good person doesn't necessarily have to be an idiot. It's not too late to make up for my mistake." Cece looked at Long Houchin with some doubt in her eyes, but the spiritual power she injected into the sapling of the Tree of Destruction became stronger. Long Houchin raised his hand and pointed at the Yuyi Queen. A strange layer of seven-colored light suddenly burst forth from her body. The gentle golden color seemed harmless, but the process of the seven-colored light spreading made Cece scream. Her dark spiritual power was instantly cut off, and her body began to shrink. "Why you put a curse on me? You bastard!" Cece's voice became sharper and more childish. In just a short while, her body had shrunk to the size of a 3- or 4-year-old girl. She even had to hold the Sun-Moon Divine Stone with both hands. Her vitality was not the only thing that had declined. Her strength had also declined. Although Cece still had her original thoughts, her powerful domain-level cultivation had completely disappeared. Naturally, she could no longer activate the destructive power of life. "I didn't know you were so despicable to plant a seal in my body." Cece glared at Long Houchin with a childish voice. It had to be said that not only was she originally a beauty, but she was also a beauty after turning into a little girl. In fact, she was even more adorable. The 6 wings on her back had also become small and exquisite, making her look rather fun to play with. Long Houchin shook his head. "I'm not the despicable one. It's because I saw through your lies that I left a backup plan. If King Easton is really an evil person like you said, then I will definitely do my best to help you. Unfortunately, you lied to me. It's useless. Even the power of the Tree of Destruction can't dispel my seal." "That's right, I definitely don't have the power of the Tree of Eternity that you mentioned, but I can be sure that my light is at least at the level of the Tree of Eternity." Cece mumbled, "You're lying, you're lying. You didn't see through my scheme at all." You were the despicable one who wanted to obtain my treasures, so you curse me. Long Houchin smiled calmly. If you don't want others to know about it, then don't do it. Since that's the case, I'll convince you wholeheartedly. First of all, there's a flaw in your words. When you thanked me before we took action, you said that even if you die, your soul will go to heaven and not return to the embrace of the Lord of Nature. At that time, I was already suspicious of you, because you also said that in Easton, both humans and elves are the subjects of the Lord of Nature. After that, before we went to look for lilac intoxicant, when you looked at my spirit wings, there was a hint of greed hidden in your eyes. My senses are very high. Perhaps you thought that you had hidden it flawlessly, but I still noticed it. It was too easy to obtain intoxicating lilac. Since it's a sacred herb, why didn't you plant it in the cave you mentioned? Also, you said that you only left a small camouflage spell there, but according to my soul detection, there was an offensive spell at the place you left the camouflage spell, and the power of that spell is already comparable to a forbidden spell. Although all of this made me suspicious, it's not the most important thing. What really confirmed my suspicions was your concealment of your abilities. When we approached Mount Easton, you landed on the ground and walked forward. At that time, I sensed King Easton's soul ripples. Although he was about to take an afternoon nap, his powerful senses covered a large area. However, due to the natural elemental ripples in the air, he missed some spots. As we advanced, you kept directing me to change directions, which was actually to avoid King Easton's senses. In other words, your senses are definitely not inferior to mine. With such senses, how can you be as simple as a mere grade 8 magus? Also, you moved according to your senses because you were clearly worried about the concealment ability of my domain. Apart from these discoveries, there's also my understanding of the world of Easton. I can honestly tell you that I don't belong to this world, but I possess the same light as this world. My soul power is far above yours, even above King Easton. When you went to retrieve the lilac intoxicating spell, I used my soul power to communicate with the natural souls of the crab world. When I communicated with them through a large tree, I sensed their faith and their emotions towards King Easton. I used my soul to ask them questions, but none of the creatures that answered my questions had any hostility towards King Easton. That was when I confirmed my judgment, but I still followed you because I wanted to see what your goal was. If I exposed you at that time, it would undoubtedly be leaving a ticking time bomb in the world of Easton. I was also curious about your goal, which is why I still followed you. Fortunately, your explanation of the lilac intoxicating spell was correct. It could only intoxicate people, but not harm them. Otherwise, I would have done it long ago. At that, Long Houchin revealed a faint smile, making him look even more charming with his handsome face. The smartest thing about you is that 90% of what you told me was true, and only the crucial 10% was false. Coupled with the sincerity in your eyes and your own beauty, it was indeed very easy for people to fall for it. However, even a wise man makes mistakes sometimes. Moreover, you've revealed so many flaws. Before you entered the cave, my palm did indeed amplify your power, but that was under the premise that everything you said was true. You didn't resist my power in order to gain my trust. If I'm not mistaken, you immediately used your water power to guide my light power out of your body after entering the cave. Unfortunately, you couldn't guide my domain out of your body. In terms of cultivation, you're not weaker than me. In fact, you might even be stronger than me. However, after my domain invaded your body and took root, even someone of your cultivation couldn't neutralize it. The name of my domain is called Life Process Control. Perhaps I can't really turn you back to your adorable age like I did with that gorilla, but I can at least seal you for 2 hours. Am I right? Your Majesty, Yu Yi. Queen Yu Yi said unwillingly, but you still fought King Easton. Aren't you afraid that he'll kill you? What if you can't defeat him? How can you be so confident in yourself? Long Houchin said, that's right. I'm not sure if I can defeat King Easton, but I'm confident that he won't kill me. You can't think of this because you don't have enough understanding of light and nature. What's the source of life? It's light and water. It's only under the influence of light and water that nature is born. I fought King Easton to further confirm his abilities. Just as I expected, King Easton has extremely pure natural elemental energy in a domain of life. How can an evil person possess such pure life aura? At the same time, I displayed my domain in front of King Easton. Although it's the first time we've met, judging from our attributes alone, it's impossible for us to become true enemies. Naturally, we won't try to kill each other in battle. I've already made this judgment before I came here. What's there to be afraid of? Long Houchin spoke calmly, but his words were reasonable. His voice was calm, but to you, Yes Queen Cece, it was like a clap of thunder. Ew. Without the influence of the destructive force of life, King Easton had already reached Long Houchin's side. He glanced at him and said, "Smart humans are truly terrifying. Fortunately, you didn't make a grave mistake." Long Houchin made an inviting gesture and said, "Since you're in charge of the Tree of Destruction, please take it back." Cece no longer had any power to resist. Although she was holding the sapling of the Tree of Destruction, she could no longer borrow its terrifying power. However, King Easton did not go to retrieve the Tree of Destruction. Instead, he frowned. Cece sneered, "You're smart indeed. However, do you think you can stop the Tree of Destruction's growth like this? You can kill me, but in the near future, when the Tree of Destruction grows, the world of Easton will become its nutrients. When that happens, you'll all die." Long Houchin frowned slightly and said, "Isn't it just a little sapling? Can't I destroy it right now?" Cece laughed hysterically despite her young age. "What a joke, what a joke. Looks like you really don't belong to the world of Easton. The Tree of Destruction is the same as the Tree of Eternity. They're both eternal and indestructible. Once its seed sprouts in the divine stone of sun and moon, it can never be destroyed. If you don't believe me, you can let that dwarf beside you try. His power is comparable to a god's. Ask him if he can destroy the Tree of Destruction." Chapter 263. Long Houchin immediately turned to King Easton and gave him a questioning look. King Easton nodded solemnly. "She's right. The Tree of Destruction is irreversible once it starts growing. We can only try our best to seal the sapling and slow down its growth. Then, I'll pray to the Master of Nature and see if he can separate a branch from the Tree of Eternity to seal the Tree of Destruction completely." Although King Easton did not blame him, Long Houchin could still hear the dissatisfaction in his tone. He apologized. "I'm sorry, King Easton. I was too careless. I didn't expect Queen Yu Yi to have such a grand plan. However, I have to say that your defense against the Tree of Destruction seed is not very tight." King Easton was a little annoyed. Who knew she had such a plan? If you hadn't stopped me, I would have discovered that she was going to attack the Tree of Destruction's seed a long time ago, and I would have had enough time to stop her. Long Houchin said, "This started because of me, so let me be the one to end it. When I entered this place, I sensed the aura of destruction. King Easton, I'll ask you one last time. Do you really want to destroy the Tree of Destruction so that it will never appear again?" King Easton said with a bitter expression, "Of course. My lord couldn't destroy it, but he also couldn't let it affect the Tree of Eternity in my lord's divine realm. That's why he gave it to me to look after. Who knew that such a problem would occur?" Long Houchin nodded. "If that's the case, leave it to me. Actually, it's not that difficult to destroy the Tree of Destruction." As he spoke, he turned around and raised his right hand, beckoning at the Tree of Destruction. A dazzling golden sword gleam shot towards the Tree of Eternity in Cece's hand. Cece still had a sneer on her face, and her lips curled into a disdainful smile. Although she had failed today, she had already sacrificed her dark soul to the Tree of Destruction in the process of praying. As long as the Tree of Destruction could grow in the near future, there was still a chance for her soul to recover. Ding! The sword ray landed on the Tree of Destruction and produced a clear buzzing sound. A layer of faint purple mist formed a layer of light that protected the Tree of Destruction. Long Houchin's sword ray didn't even have a chance to cause any purple light before it was extinguished. Long Houchin nodded slowly and said, "It does have a very strong defense." Cece said disdainfully, "What's very strong? It is indestructible." Long Houchin smiled. "Don't be too confident. In this world, nothing is impossible. As he spoke, he slowly raised his hands and made a grasping motion in the air. Then, 9 purplish-gold light patterns slowly appeared on his forehead. When the 9 lines of light appeared, Long Houchen's face, which was originally filled with the aura of light, had an additional layer of demonic charm. Even King Easton was shocked. However, he soon realized that Long Houchen's heart of light had not changed at all. Only the power had changed a little. Afterwards, King Easton and Cece saw a huge sword extend from Long Houchen's grasping hands. The purplish-gold body of the sword was dazzling, especially the 6 heads on the hilt. All of them radiated with a cold gaze, as if they were observing everything around them. As soon as the purple-gold heavy sword appeared, the god artifact in King Easton's hands and the god artifact armor he was wearing began to buzz softly. King Easton said in surprise, "My treasure is in fear." What kind of sword is that?" Long Houchen smiled. "Since I'm going to destroy the Tree of Destruction, I'll call it Destroyer's Kill. Its full name shall be Destroyer's Kill, Purplish Gold Hao Sword." As he spoke, the purplish gold sword in his hand had already turned into a streak of light and slashed at the Tree of Destruction in Cece's hands. This time, Cece felt a great threat. She wasn't afraid of the Tree of Destruction being attacked, but she was behind the Tree of Destruction. She didn't have as strong a defense as the Tree of Destruction. Be it humans or elves, they all had a strong desire to live. Almost subconsciously, Cece let go of the divine stone of sun and moon in her hand. The purplish-gold light flashed like lightning and struck the Tree of Destruction in midair. The layer of purple light appeared on the Tree of Destruction again. However, it was different from the sword intent that Long Houchen had instantly dispersed. This time, when the purple light came into contact with the purplish-gold Hao sword, the two actually stuck together. In other words, the Tree of Destruction that was attached to the divine stone of sun and moon seemed to be stuck in the air by the purplish-gold Hao sword. The sapling of the Tree of Destruction trembled violently on the divine stone of sun and moon. The layers of purple light became even more intense, and there were even some sparkling purple starlight. The purplish-gold Hao sword was still flowing with purplish-gold light. However, the 6 huge eyes on the hilt were all open, as if they had come alive. They stared coldly at the struggling Tree of Destruction. "No, that's impossible," Cece said in a daze. The power of destruction nurtured by the Tree of Destruction, even in its initial state, can instantly destroy any power that attacks it. How can it resist? Just as she stared in disbelief, the tip of the purplish-gold Hao sword suddenly changed. The originally sharp blade instantly turned into a huge mouth. It bit through the layer of power of destruction emitted by the Tree of Destruction and bit the sapling directly. With a strong tug, it actually tore the sapling from the divine stone of sun and moon. Then it opened its mouth and swallowed. The Tree of Destruction immediately turned into a ball of purple light and disappeared without a trace in the aura of the purplish-gold Hao sword. Long Houchen raised his right hand and sucked the divine stone of sun and moon into his hand. He turned to the completely stunned King Easton and asked, "Is this yours?" King Easton shook his head and said subconsciously, "This is a natural treasure nurtured by nature. It doesn't belong to me. You snatched it back, so it's yours. But did you really destroy the Tree of Destruction?" Long Houchen smiled and said, "I think so. Don't worry, there won't be a problem." When he entered King Easton's cave and sensed the destructive intent, Haoyue's emotions appeared in Long Houchen's heart. Haoyue was filled with desire for the power of destruction and constantly urged Long Houchen to snatch it. However, this was King Easton's territory. Naturally, Long Houchen would not do that before he knew the truth. At the same time, with Haoyue's hint, he became even more suspicious of Cece. Haoyue also told him clearly that although the power of destruction was pure and powerful, it was not enough to cause any harm to it. It could only be used as nourishment. With this, it could complete its final evolution in the shortest time possible. This was also the first time Haoyue told Long Houchen that it was close to completing its final evolution. The reason why Long Haochen repeatedly asked King Easton if he wanted to destroy the Tree of Destruction was so that he could legitimately provide nourishment to Hao Yue. He was not sure if the Tree of Destruction was really destroyed, but there was one thing he was sure of. Hao Yue would never spit out anything it ate, especially since Hao Yue had told him earlier that the Tree of Destruction was not on the same level as it was. There was no possibility of a backlash. Cece was completely dumbfounded. Her last hope had been dashed. Suddenly, she screamed and clutched her head, rolling on the ground in pain. No matter how beautiful a girl was, screaming in pain would not look good. Long Haochen was shocked, but he could not touch the seal on his domain skill at the moment. King Easton, what's wrong with her? She must have sacrificed all the darkness in her soul to the Tree of Destruction. Now that the Tree of Destruction has been completely destroyed, the darkness in her soul has also been shattered. She has lost a part of her soul, which is why she is in so much pain. Look, the darkness in her body is starting to dissipate. Haha, Queen Yu Yi of the Night Elves has lost her power of darkness. Easton will be peaceful for a long time in the future, without the threat of the Tree of Destruction. Friend, thank you. My friendship will be with you forever. Although the Night Elves were not a great threat to King Easton, they had always disturbed the peace of Easton, especially after Queen Yu Yi had done something like this. This naturally made him even more vigilant. Now that Queen Yu Yi Cece's soul had been damaged, and she had lost her power of darkness, the Night Elves had lost their leader. Naturally, they could not cause any more trouble. What made King Easton even happier was that the most troublesome Tree of Destruction had been completely destroyed by Long Haochen. From now on, he could rest easy. With his cultivation, nothing in the Eastern world could pose a threat to him. At this moment, Long Haochen had a sudden thought. He subconsciously summoned the cracked aria of the goddess of light and blue rain, Hibiscus of Light. The two divine swords had left irreparable marks in a collision just now. Their auras were extremely weak, but at this moment, Long Haochen sensed a weak yet familiar aura of life from the two divine swords. Almost without any hesitation, Long Haochen said to King Easton, I need your domain of life to strengthen me. Help me. King Easton answered without hesitation, no problem. Come. As he spoke, his aquamarine life, celestial domain, had already expanded and enveloped Long Haochen's body completely. Long Haochen slowly raised the two divine swords in the air and stared at them with a burning gaze. He took a deep breath and steadied his mind. In the next moment, he slowly brought the swords together, which could shatter at any time. Rainbow light rose from the domain of light and completely enveloped the two divine swords. They were about to fuse together, and the aura of life and creation appeared. However, this power was too much of a burden for the two divine swords that were already damaged. They began to buzz softly. Long Haochen growled, Without destruction, there can be no construction. She had sacrificed a great deal to nurture you two. Now, please truly fuse with them. Boom! The swords of life and creation immediately exploded, turning into countless specks of light. Among these specks of light, the largest was a ball of golden light. Long Haochen's gaze locked onto that ball of golden light. At the same time, all the shattered specks of light were enveloped by his domain of light. Time stopped, and the power to control the progress of life instantly enveloped these specks of light. A ray of rainbow light shot out from Long Haochen's chest, accompanied by his rapidly beating heart of eternity. It was directly injected into the golden speck of light. Immediately, the golden speck of light began to expand and stretch at an alarming rate. The aura of life also became denser and denser. It was as if a small golden embryo was being nurtured. A humanoid figure gradually appeared. Immediately after, the humanoid figure began to expand, and its body began to stretch. There were even 3 pairs of small light wings on its back. Her appearance also gradually became clearer. She was beautiful and gentle, but also so transparent and weak. Wasn't she Yiting? Back then, when Long Haochen was killed by the Demon Emperor in the Star Demon Tower, his heart was completely shattered. And where Yiting was was also the acupuncture point next to Long Houchen's heart. The might of the demon god emperor's attack was really too great, to the point that Yu Ting's fairy body instantly collapsed. Only her soul, which had been absorbed by the divine sword during the battle between her life and the creation sword, was able to escape this calamity. However, her soul was also extremely weak and fell into a deep slumber. Ever since he was resurrected, Long Houchen had been cultivating while searching for traces of Yu Ting. After such a long period of hard work, accompanied by the evolution of his cultivation base, he finally discovered a possibility. Yu Ting had truly been turned into a sword spirit by the two divine swords. Only when they fused to become the life and creation swords could Long Houchen sense a trace of Yu Ting's aura. However, even though he knew that Yu Ting's soul might still exist, Long Houchen did not dare to act rashly. If he shattered the two divine swords, Yu Ting's soul might immediately disperse. It was better to continue staying in the divine swords. Everything that happened before him finally gave Long Houchen enough opportunity. The evolved light God's domain allowed him to grasp the miraculous ability of the life process. He was using the power of his domain to urge Yu Ting's weakened soul to evolve. This process was complicated and troublesome. It would also greatly deplete Long Houchen's strength, but he had King Easton by his side as a great supplement. Therefore, when he released the power of his domain, he could continuously amplify it without any worries. Gradually, Yu Ting's body stabilized, and Long Houchen let out a long sigh. At least he could be sure that Yu Ting's soul would not disperse in this state. The following process was even more complicated. Long Houchen began to slowly pour the power of the two shattered divine swords into Yu Ting's body. With his pure light, God's domain, Yu Ting's soul was gradually enhanced to an extremely powerful level. It must not be forgotten that Yu Ting had fused with the Saint's spiritual stove before, and the Saint's spiritual stove's nurturing power was also in slumber in her soul. This time, they were awakened at the same time. Whether it was the aria of the goddess of light or the blue rain, hibiscus of light, they had both been nurtured by Yu Ting for a long time. Now that they were shattered, they were absorbed into Yu Ting's body and turned into pure energy to fuse with Yu Ting's soul. It was not difficult, but it required a lot of external power. King Easton's jade-green life dominion could be seen hovering in the air. Within the life dominion was Long Houchen's light God's domain, which shone with rainbow light. At the very center was Yu Ting, who was emitting a gentle golden light. After receiving the power from the two shattered divine swords, Yu Ting's body gradually became more solid. The heart-wrenching feeling of weakness was also gradually decreasing. What Long Houchen had poured into her was not just the power from the two shattered divine swords. More importantly, it was a tremendous life force guided by light. For fairies, even elemental fairies, their thirst for life force was extremely great. Not to mention that Long Houchen had long since stopped treating Yu Ting as a pure elemental fairy. King Easton was indeed powerful. His life dominion did not show any signs of weakening despite being continuously absorbed by Long Houchen's light God's domain. Furthermore, large amounts of life force could be seen surging into Long Houchen's light God's domain, continuously strengthening him. As the ruler of this world, King Easton had supreme authority here. He was the spokesperson of the Lord of Nature and the controller of life force. If not for Long Houchen's light God's domain restraining him too much, he would not have been suppressed to the point where he could not do anything. With the powerful support of this ally, Long Houchen's original difficulty in reconstructing Yu Ting's body was fundamentally resolved. At the same time, he used his greatly evolved soul power to continuously control his light God's domain. While helping Yu Ting reconstruct her body, he also comprehended the various changes brought about by the evolution of his domain, as well as the profoundness of controlling domains. With this comprehension, he could be considered to have truly grasped the profound meaning of rank 3. Long Houchen's newly comprehended domain, controlling the process of life, could be said to have endless uses. Its only flaw was that it did not have very strong offensive and defensive abilities. Against opponents weaker than him, this domain was an absolutely invincible weapon. It could even undergo various changes. However, if the opponent also had a powerful domain, then his domain would only be effective in certain aspects. In terms of offensive power, it was not even comparable to the Divine Light Waltz. Of course, as he comprehended this domain, his Light God's domain took a huge step forward. It had already evolved to an even more terrifying level. Finally, when the last fragment of the Divine Sword had fused with Yu Ting's body, Long Haochen's domain stopped activating. Yu Ting's entire body emitted a gentle golden halo. Her eyes were wide open as she looked at Long Haochen's pale complexion from activating the domain for a long time. Her eyes were already filled with tears. However, the current her couldn't make a sound. The enormous spiritual power within her body was also undergoing an earth-shaking fusion. The nurturing power of the Saint's spiritual stove produced a huge effect at this moment. With the help of Long Haochen's Light God's domain, all of the different energies that she had absorbed into her body were completely fused. In this way, not only did Yu Ting complete the reconstruction of her body, she also became more solid than before. Within the gentle light element, there was also a portion of spiritual power that belonged to the Divine Sword. Circles of white halos began to emit from Yu Ting's body. At this time, she had already completed the fusion. Long Haochen had done what he could. The next level that Yu Ting could improve would depend on her own efforts. Long Haochen waved his left hand, and Queen Yu Ye's body, which had become motionless in the distance, was suddenly pulled over by him through the air. At this time, Queen Yu Yi was completely silent. She had lost her dark soul. Although her body still had a breath of life, in fact, she was just a walking corpse, a shell without a soul. Long Haochen's left hand pressed on the top of Queen Yu Ye's head. The Light God's domain instantly rushed into her body, and the seal on her body was lifted first. Immediately, the Night Queen's body grew rapidly. However, because she had shrunk earlier, her clothes had fallen off. Previously, she was only 3 or 4 years old, so it didn't seem like much. Now that she had grown up again, her fair, translucent, and flawless body appeared in the sight of Long Haochen and King Easton. As if he had encountered a ghost, King Easton quickly turned his head away and muttered something inaudible. The beard on his face trembled, as if he, who was not afraid of anything, was actually afraid of a woman's naked body. Long Haochen's willpower was much stronger than his. He only quickly closed his eyes to prevent himself from looking at indecent things, but his actions didn't change. The Light God's domain entered Queen Yu Ye's body. At this time, Queen Yu Yi had lost her soul, and all that was left was a shell. However, the spiritual power in her body was still very strong. After Long Haochen's spiritual power entered her body, he first examined her. He discovered that Queen Yu Yi was a dual elemental existence of darkness and water. The strength of her spiritual power was about the same as before his evolution, and her cultivation was also at the second level of the 9th rank. Although she was much inferior to King Easton, it shouldn't be forgotten that she was a dual elemental at the second level of the 9th rank. The life force began to bloom in her body in an attempt to expel the dark spiritual power in her body. However, Long Haochen soon discovered that it was futile. The dark element in Queen Yu Ye's body was very stubborn. Although she had lost the guidance of her soul, unless Long Haochen completely destroyed her body, it was impossible to cleanse her of the dark element. Obviously, this was because the Queen of Darkness's power came from her bloodline. The stubbornness of the dark element brought about by her bloodline was definitely not something that awakened afterbirth could compare to. It's useless. Don't waste your energy. Queen Yu Yi is the leader of the Night Elves. Her dark element is deeply rooted in her body. Although King Easton turned away from Long Haochen's actions, his senses were still there. He naturally knew what Long Haochen was doing. After all, Yu Ting was an elemental elf. In a sense, she was only in existence in the form of a soul. No matter how solid her soul was, it was still a soul. Long Haochen wanted to find a body for her, and Queen Yu, who had lost her soul, was clearly the most suitable. Since they were both elves, it was much easier for an elemental elf to fuse with a real elf than with other races. However, the prerequisite was that their attributes had to be the same, and there would be no rejection. King Easton was the wielder of the power of life, so he naturally understood this. He also knew what Long Haochen was trying to do, but he did not think that Long Haochen could succeed. Long Haochen thought for a moment, then said, "Perhaps there's only one other way." As he spoke, he raised his right hand and slowly pressed it on Queen Yu's perky left breast. King Easton could not help but jump in fright when he sensed Long Haochen's actions. He hurriedly said, "Friend, don't let your heart of light waver." He was afraid that Long Haochen would be blinded by lust and do something he shouldn't. If that really happened, his power of light would no longer be pure. Long Haochen shook his head gently. Then, the hand he pressed on Queen Yu's chest glowed faintly red. Drops of blood appeared on his fingers at the same time, then slowly seeped into Queen Yu's skin. King Easton could no longer care about Queen Yu's naked body. He turned around abruptly and looked at Long Haochen in a daze. "Is this worth it? Even if you succeed, you'll definitely be greatly injured. Even if an elemental fairy doesn't have a body, she'll follow you forever." Long Haochen shook his head gently. Yuting isn't just an elemental fairy. She's also my partner. I've never treated her as a follower. She's my friend. If I miss this opportunity, perhaps she'll never have a physical body again. Yuting has already sacrificed a lot for me. So what if I'm only injured a little? Long Haochen had done the same thing once before. It was on Night's Sacred Mountain. To save Hao Yue's life, he used his own blood to change Hao Yue's attributes. That's right. If he wanted to remove the darkness in Yu's bloodline, he could only use the power of his bloodline to cleanse it. Long Haochen wanted to use his own blood to replace Queen Yu's dark constitution. He wanted to use the pure God of Light's bloodline to create the most perfect body for Yuting. In the air, Yuting's body was trembling slightly. Her emotions were fluctuating violently. However, her fusion was not complete yet. Moreover, she was under the control of Long Haochen's God of Light domain. She couldn't move at all. She could only watch as drops of blood from Long Haochen's hand entered Queen Yu's body. Large drops of tears continuously fell from Yuting's eyes. She was so glad that she had made the choice back then. Looking at Long Haochen, she suddenly felt that her emotions had become rich and colorful. It was as if she was truly alive and not just an elemental body. She slowly closed her eyes, and the light emitted from her body became even more resplendent. Long Haochen had used his actions to help Yuting understand a higher level of the Heart of Light. Her soul had also begun to evolve along with her elemental body. Long Haochen was no longer the Long Haochen of the past. Back then, he had almost bled to death in order to save Hao Yue's life. If not for Hao Yue's timely blood nourishment, he would have died long ago. However, things are different now. He possessed the constitution of the God of Light. Whether it was in the holy demon continent or the Eastern world, it was the purest constitution of light. When his first drop of the God of Light's blood entered Yu's body, the darkness bloodline in Yu's body fluctuated greatly. If Queen Yu's soul was still present, she could still control her power to forcefully reject it and cause trouble for Long Haochen. However, she had already lost her soul. Without a leader, the power of darkness could only struggle chaotically. Drop after drop of the God of Light's blood flowed into Yu's body. When the impure darkness encountered the purest light, the result was obvious. The black was gradually replaced by gold. One could clearly see layers of black mist spreading from Yu's body. Her skin became even more crystalline, and a faint layer of gold began to appear. King Easton's eyes were filled with respect. This was the first time he had felt such emotions toward the human. He ruled over the elves under his command, but even the kind elves could not compare to this man's character. He slowly flew behind Long Haochen and pressed his hands on his back. A ball of green light lit up on his chest, shining on Long Haochen's body. One could vaguely see a green leaf shining on King Easton's chest. It was one of the 7 leaves of eternity at the top of the tree of eternity. It was also the source of King Easton's power. He was mobilizing his own life force and the tree of eternity's boundless life force to help Long Houchen. With King Easton's support, Long Houchen's heart of eternity beat at least twice as fast. With this rapid beating, the circulation of his bloodline became even stronger. With the immense life force, his weakness was instantly swept away. His blood was now filled with even more life force. It became easier to purge Queen Yu Ye's dark bloodline. Finally, when the last bit of darkness was purged from Yu Ye's body, her entire body radiated with a holy light. Faint halos flowed under her fair skin, making her look like a perfect statue. At that moment, the fusion of Yu Ye's power was finally completed. An intense pillar of white light shot into the sky, connecting the top and bottom of the cavern. Under the holy light, the 3 pairs of wings on Yu Ye's back became 4. At the same time, a golden ray of light about an inch long appeared on her forehead. Amidst the gentleness, her aura contained an indescribable holiness and sharpness. Her originally excited gaze became calm as she silently stared at Long Houchen, like a child looking at her father. There was reverence, love, and countless other positive emotions. Long Houchen smiled and said, "Yu Ting, this body should be able to contain your soul. Come, as long as the fusion is successful, you will be a real elf." Lightly nodding her head, Yu Ting flew in front of Long Houchen and said, "Master, no matter what Yu Ting becomes, you will always be my master." Long Houchen rubbed her head and said, "Silly girl, don't say that. If it wasn't for me, your soul wouldn't have been nearly shattered. I'm really happy that I can help you reconstruct your body. I've always treated you like a younger sister. From now on, you will be my younger sister. If you're willing, you can follow my surname and call me Big Brother Sheng." Yu Ting's red lips slightly trembled as she suddenly threw herself into Long Houchen's embrace. Big Brother. Her voice was filled with sincerity. That's right, the body she was about to fuse with contained Long Houchen's blood. When she fused with that body, she could truly be considered as Long Houchen's family. Long Houchen gently stroked her back and said, "Don't cry. This is a happy day." Suddenly, Yu Ting raised her head and wrapped her arms around Long Houchen's neck. She gazed at him with teary eyes and said, "Master, before you become my big brother." With that, she suddenly kissed Long Houchen's lips as fast as lightning. She was too fast, and everything happened too suddenly. Long Houchen still had to maintain the state of Yu Yi Queen's body, so he was instantly kissed. At this moment, Yu Ting was still in her elemental body. Her lips were cold, but they contained an indescribable emotion. Long Houchen was in a daze, while King Easton, who was behind him, had a strange expression on his face. An elf's kiss was one of the most precious things in their lives. Elves were a race that was extremely loyal to one person. Even the Elven King would only have one lover in his life. The way they dedicated their body and soul to their lover was by offering their kiss to express their undying loyalty and no regrets. Although Yu Ting was still an elemental elf, King Easton knew from the golden pattern on her forehead that once she obtained her own body, she would definitely become an existence on the same level as the Elven King. She would be even more powerful than Queen Yu Yi Queen. Long Houchen had acknowledged her as his sister, but she had already given all her feelings to him. She probably didn't know about the customs of the elves, right? Yu Ting's kiss was very short. She raised her head gently and looked at Long Houchen. "Master, if there really is an afterlife, I don't want to be your sister. I want to be your lover." After saying that, her figure suddenly flashed, and she had already merged with the body of Yu Yi Queen, whose dark aura had been completely removed. Yu Ting's kiss and words filled Long Houchen's heart with shock. It was even more shocking than the battle with King Easton. Although he didn't know what an elf's kiss meant, he could feel Yu Ting's feelings for him. However, he couldn't accept this feeling because his heart was already filled with the green bamboo cane, the blind girl of the past, and the love of the present. Queen Yu Yi Queen's body began to emit an intense golden light. Her soul and body were beginning to completely merge. Yu Ting's body did not just merge with Queen Yu Yi Queen's body. There was also her pure light attribute and powerful elemental body. After completing the previous fusion, Yu Ting's cultivation had risen to the 9th stage. Merging with Queen Yu Yi Queen's body, which had been baptized by Long Haoqin's bloodline, was as easy as water flowing when the conditions were right. However, this way, Long Haoqin's bloodline flowed in her body, and she could no longer have any emotional entanglement with him. Before she had a body, she had yearned for the day she could become a true elf and not a pure elemental elf. However, when she really fused with a body, her heart was filled with reluctance. Chapter 264. Yu Ting had followed Long Haoqin for a long time. From the moment she started to follow Long Haoqin, she knew about the relationship between Long Haoqin and Kai. Because she knew Long Haoqin very well, she knew that it was impossible for her and Long Haoqin to be together, even if they had a body. Since that was the case, she could only settle for the next best thing, which was to be his sister, a sister who would share life and death with him. Goddess Yu Ye's body slowly floated up, and pairs of light golden transparent wings slowly spread out behind her. This meant that Yu Ting's body fusion was going very smoothly. 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3 pairs, 4 pairs. When there were 4 pairs of wings, a faint smile appeared on Long Haoqin's face. This meant that after the fusion, at least Yu Ting's cultivation did not weaken. At this moment, the 5th pair of wings suddenly unfurled. Unlike the previous 4 pairs, this 5th pair of wings was actually light blue in color, not light gold. Success. Long Haoqin clenched his fists excitedly. Although he had removed the dark attribute from Queen Yu Ye's body, he had kept the water attribute. Water and light were both sources of life, and they were compatible with each other. Coupled with Long Haoqin's light god bloodline, Yu Ting's body would be even more perfect. In terms of bloodline, Yu Ting might be slightly inferior to Long Haoqin's, but with 2 attributes, she could also use the power of life creation. Following closely behind the 5th pair of wings was the 6th pair of wings. In total, there were 6 pairs of wings. 12 wings slowly unfurled behind Yu Ting's back. 8 of them were golden in color, while the other 4 were blue. The spiritual energy fluctuations coming from Yu Ting's body were extremely astonishing. Faintly, a 7-colored halo was being emitted from her body. This was similar to the effect of Long Haoqin's evolved light god domain. However, the difference was that within this 7-colored halo, there were 3 colors that were the most eye-catching, while the other 4 colors were gradually fading away, as if they were being devoured by these 3 colors. The 3 eye-catching colors were gold, blue, and green. The 3-colored halo circled around Yu Ting's body, and the most powerful was gold. Queen Yu Ye's original black hair was completely dyed gold, while the blue turned into a long dress, and the green became the color of Yu Ting's eyes. At this moment, the aura Yu Ting was even stronger than Long Haoqin's. The tricolored light formed the ripples of a domain, and its power was already close to King Easton. King Easton came to Long Haoqin's side and bowed slightly to Yu Ting. "Welcome, Elven Queen of Light." Yu Ting nodded slightly at King Easton. Her aquamarine eyes were full of vitality, and she looked at Long Haoqin with a gentle gaze. She made a few gestures in front of her chest, and a strange light pattern immediately floated out and flew towards Long Haoqin's chest. Long Haoqin was slightly stunned. He didn't quite understand what Yu Ting was trying to do, but he believed that Yu Ting wouldn't harm him, so he instinctively accepted the light pattern. The light pattern entered his hand and instantly disappeared into his body. Immediately after, Long Haoqin's body shook violently, and he and Yu Ting trembled at the same time. A golden bridge quickly appeared between the two of them, connecting them with their chests. Long Haoqin felt his spiritual energy rising at an alarming rate. Originally, he had the Heart of Eternity, increasing his spiritual energy by 90,000. After breaking through to the 3rd level of the 9th order, his spiritual energy had exceeded 300,000. At this time, he felt his acupuncture points opening up from top to bottom along his spine. In just a short while, his internal spiritual energy had increased by more than 50,000, reaching the level of 350,000. However, there was no joy on his face. There was only a hint of helplessness. Yu Ting, why do you have to do this? Yu Ting, no. Yu Ting should be called Long Haochen now. Having inherited the beautiful looks of Yi Queen Cece, she smiled at Long Haochen. My body and life were given to me by Big Brother. If Big Brother is gone one day, then what's the point of me living? Moreover, the contract has been completed. It can't be changed. It turned out that the seemingly simple rune, just now, was actually Yu Ting's blood contract. She had Long Haochen's bloodline in her body. After completing the blood contract, she gave it back to Long Haochen. Relying on her stronger cultivation than Long Haochen, she forcibly concealed the aura of the blood contract. So much so that Long Haochen didn't notice it. After the blood contract was completed, Long Haochen was naturally affected by the contract, and his cultivation greatly increased, just like his relationship with Hao Yue. The 12 wings on her back stretched out, and Yu Ting flashed to Long Haochen's side. She hugged his left arm and giggled. With the blood contract connected, Big Brother will never leave me. Long Haochen rubbed her head helplessly. You're such a silly girl. King Easton looked at Long Haochen, then at Yu Ting. A smile appeared on his face as he mumbled, this should be the best ending. At this moment, the time around them froze again. While Long Haochen was slightly shocked, the emotionless voice rang out in his mind again. You did not lose yourself in the midst of benefits. You searched for true knowledge in the midst of illusions, cleansed the darkness with light, and molded between light and water. You have passed the first test. King Easton's admiration and friendliness is your greatest reward from this test. Hearing that, Long Haochen's first thought was that it was as he expected. This was probably a hint from the throne of God of eternity and creation. He did not have to follow it, and there might even be misdirection in between. If he had not discovered Queen Yu Ye's scheme, or followed the hint even after discovering it, he might have already failed the test. This was a test from the throne of God of eternity and creation. It was not just a test of strength, but also of humanity, wisdom, and many other aspects. However, this was only the first test. What would the subsequent tests be? At this moment, a loud dragon's roar suddenly reverberated in the cave. Long Haochen jumped in fright, while King Easton's expression immediately darkened. Is there no end to it? The holy dragon has come to harass my Easton again just because it's the god of creation's mouth. As he spoke, King Easton had already dashed out of the cave. Long Haochen knew that the holy dragon's arrival was closely related to his upcoming test. He dared not tarry, and hurriedly flew out with Yu Ting. After leaving the cave, he and Yu Ting subconsciously looked up at the sky, because the originally clear blue sky had changed color. The entire sky was filled with a dense holy aura. It was dignified and oppressive, and the world of Easton that was illuminated by the rainbow light also changed color. King Easton hovered in the air, staring into the distance with a burning gaze. A speck of light was flying in his direction. Long Haochen's eyesight was extremely good, but before he could focus his gaze, the existence that was previously just a speck of light was already magnified in his vision. It was a dragon, a real dragon. It had no wings, and its slender body was over 30 meters long. Its body was covered in golden scales, and it had 5 claws under its abdomen and 2 horns on its head. Its dignified eyes stared in their direction. As it rapidly approached, all the rainbow light in the sky rippled. King Easton roared angrily, Holy Dragon, are you done yet? You come to my place for a stroll when you have nothing better to do. Are you that bored? I just don't know if you have that thing. The Holy Dragon snorted coldly. Shorty, aren't you just afraid that your believers will change their faith? If you can, come to my Divine Dragon Island. I'm not here for you today. This is God's will. Human, defeat me. That is the second test you must face. King Easton was just about to say something when a ray of emerald light suddenly descended from the sky and shone on him. King Easton immediately shivered. He did not say the words that were at the tip of his tongue, and could only shake his head apologetically at Long Haochen. That was the pure power of nature, filled with boundless vitality. The only thing that could make King Easton feel helpless was his faith, the power of the Lord of Nature. It was obvious that the test of the throne of God of eternity and creation would not lower its difficulty just because of his relationship with King Easton. What Long Houchin did not know was that his second test was supposed to last an hour under the Holy Dragon's attack without being defeated. However, because he had revived Yiting, the test difficulty had increased. Since it was a test, it could not be avoided. There was no point in saying anything more. Long Houchin nodded at the Holy Dragon and said, "Please." As he spoke, his figure flashed, and he turned into a ray of golden light that soared into the sky. As he flew, his light god's domain expanded as well, as if avoiding the Holy Dragon's domain that covered the entire horizon. At the same time, a ball of rainbow light shone as Long Houchin flew. When he rose thousands of meters into the sky, there was already a holy unicorn beneath him. Although the battle had yet to begin, Long Houchin already had a rough idea of the Holy Dragon's strength. As the most powerful magical beast he knew, and a powerhouse that even King Easton could not handle, the Holy Dragon's cultivation was probably at least above level 9 5th rank. More terrifyingly, its physical strength was definitely not inferior to its spiritual power. The only thing that gave Long Houchin a chance was his own domain. All holy creatures mainly focused on light, and his light god's domain could be said to be the source of all light attributes. It was enough to restrain the Holy Dragon's abilities in this aspect. That was why he wanted to try and see what would happen when his domain came into contact with the Holy Dragon's domain. The moment the two domains came into contact in the sky, King Easton, who was watching the battle from afar, immediately felt a strange sensation. When Long Houchin's light god's domain crashed into the Holy Dragon's domain, it was like a hot iron smashing into a large piece of butter. It sizzled and sizzled as it sank into the Holy Dragon's domain. The sky was also filled with rainbow light, but the holy domain lacked the golden foundation of the light god's domain. It surged and spread rapidly, but not only did it fail to suppress Long Houchin even managed to occupy a corner of the sky. What pure light energy. No wonder you're qualified for me to take action. The Holy Dragon looked curiously at Long Houchin, but it did not stop moving. A rainbow-colored breath shot straight at Long Houchin. Long Houchin's expression was calm as he rode on the holy unicorn. A faint smile appeared on his face. As he raised his right hand, the rainbow-colored light from the light god's domain immediately burst forth like a tsunami. As it rapidly dispersed the Holy Dragon's holy domain, it also collided with the dragon's breath. The Holy Dragon's breath was rapidly weakened, but after the golden part of the rainbow-colored light disappeared, the other colors continued to rush towards Long Houchin. Without waiting for Long Houchin to make a move, Yiting's figure flashed and appeared in front of Long Houchin. The 12 wings on her back spread open, and her right hand pointed at the sudden attack. A huge sword of light over 100 meters long appeared out of thin air. With a flash of light, it cut through the Holy Dragon's breath and flew straight at the Holy Dragon's body. At the same time, a layer of domain energy condensed around Yiting's body. It was also of the light attribute, but it was completely different from Long Houchin's light god's domain. Yiting's light was like the noon sun, dazzling and fierce. The huge sword of light that was over 100 meters long flashed with dazzling golden light in the sky. It was filled with the aura of a ruler as it advanced courageously. Was this a domain technique? However, wasn't it too easy for Yiting to use her domain technique? She wasn't prepared at all. However, the huge golden sword clearly had the aura of her domain. The Holy Dragon was also taken aback. As the one bearing the sword, it could sense the aura from the giant sword the most. It did not dare to be careless in the slightest when it saw the king's sword, which was nothing fancy but filled with indescribable destructive power. Its huge body swayed in the air, and a bolt of rainbow-colored lightning shot out from each of the horns on its head. The two bolts of lightning merged into one in the air and blasted towards the huge golden sword. Amidst the violent rumble, the huge golden sword paused in the air for a moment, surrounded by rainbow-colored lightning. Yuting snorted coldly. She quickly made a few complicated gestures with her hands in front of her chest, then pressed them down forcefully. Immediately, the huge sword shone with golden light, forcibly breaking through the rainbow-colored lightning and slashing towards the holy dragon with unstoppable force. Is this the domain weapon? King Easton's eyes widened from afar. Even he felt a lingering fear towards Yuting's strength. A domain weapon? This was the first time Long Haochen had heard of such a thing. However, looking at the situation in front of him and drawing inferences, he could vaguely guess that Yuting's domain might be a special form. She directly used her domain as a weapon, but it wasn't a domain technique. That huge sword should be her domain weapon. It was very likely that she had fused all the energy of the two divine swords during her recovery, resulting in this special evolution. From Yuting's attack, just now, Long Haochen could sense that in terms of spiritual power, she was not much inferior to King Easton. Like King Easton, they were probably rank 9 level 4 powerhouses, while the Holy Dragon was probably rank 9 level 5. The reason why Long Haochen guessed that King Easton was at rank 5 was because he saw with his own eyes that his entire body suddenly turned rainbow-colored. Long Haochen quickly dodged the huge golden sword with a twist of his body. At the same time, he struck the back of the sword with his tail, causing it to fly to the side. Yuting's body trembled slightly. The huge golden sword in the air also paused for a moment. She had just obtained a body. Although her cultivation had evolved to the level of an elven king, she was still not proficient in controlling it. Long Haochen pointed his right hand at Yuting. Immediately, the rainbow-colored light surged towards Yuting like rivers flowing into the sea. He and Yuting were connected by a blood contract, and their strength came from the same source. When his domain enveloped Yuting, Yuting's aura immediately surged. She drew a circle in the air with both hands, and the huge golden sword shone brightly. It transformed into a sword screen in the air, forcefully suppressing the holy dragon that was about to charge at her. The holy dragon was depressed. Although Yuting's domain weapon was very powerful, it was still confident that it could win the battle in a short amount of time under normal circumstances. However, Long Haochen's domain was too strong against its domain. After the light attribute, which was the most important attribute, was completely weakened, the holy dragon's strength was reduced by at least a third. Although its body was strong, it did not dare to go head-on against Yuting's domain weapon. For a moment, it was at a disadvantage. What worried the holy dragon even more was that as Yuting became more proficient in controlling the golden sword, and with the amplification of Long Haochen's domain, Yuting's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. The holy dragon was forced to retreat again and again, and had no choice but to continuously use the domain to fight against her. Long Haochen withdrew his right hand that had been pointing towards the sky. He had actually thought of a way to deal with the holy dragon, but he did not expect Yuting to have such an ability. In that case, there was no hurry to reveal his trump card. Only heaven knew if there were more difficult tests after the eternal and creation throne of God. The light god's domain fully supported Yuting's domain, and the horn on the holy unicorn's head constantly emitted circles of rainbow-colored halos, strengthening Long Haochen's spiritual power. The world of Easton was a world full of life, and light was naturally indispensable. Moreover, the light element here was very pure. The holy dragon had come here many times because it liked the light element here, but at this moment, the light element only acknowledged one master, and that was the light god's domain. The suppression of the domain prevented the holy dragon from fully unleashing its strength, and under the combined efforts of Long Haochen and Yuting, there was nothing they could do. As it fought against the golden sword, the holy dragon's gaze began to focus, and it began to chant in a low voice. Its voice was very unique, and it was clearly the language of the dragon race. As it continued to chant, the six-colored light emitted from its body became brighter and brighter. Compared to the holy unicorn, the holy dragon also had 6 major attributes: water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, and ice. With the addition of light, It had all 7 attributes. At this moment, it could not use the power of the light element, but it could still use the other 6 attributes. As the holy dragon continued to chant, the sky seemed to boil, and a large number of 6-colored halos turned into halos that floated in the air. Draconic magic. Long Houchen's expression became solemn. The holy dragon's draconic magic was definitely the most powerful attack of the dragon race. On the holy demon continent, even ordinary dragons were rare, let alone a holy dragon. Even if it lacked one attribute, the power of this attack would still be terrifying. Long Houchen could not help but raise his right hand again. "Big brother, let me do it. I can do it." Yu Ting's determined voice sounded in Long Houchen's ears. Immediately afterwards, her body suddenly turned into a stream of light, flying towards her golden sword. Yu Ting's domain was called the Ruler's Sword, and was a pure domain weapon. Domain weapons were existences that were above ordinary divine weapons, and the most powerful domain weapons could even surpass the might of a supreme divine weapon. What was she doing? Yu Ting quickly gave him the answer. With a flash of light, her body quietly disappeared from the ruler's sword. A golden light that was 100 times stronger than before suddenly burst forth, and a terrifying sword intent soared into the sky, as if it wanted to pierce through the heavens. The holy dragon's draconic magic was also completed at this moment. In the sky, the phantoms of 6 dragons that were over 1,000 meters long appeared, and each dragon spat out a powerful breath towards Long Houchen. Each dragon's breath was comparable to a super forbidden spell. The 6 dragon phantoms were activated at the same time, and the sky suddenly changed color, and the sun and moon dimmed. However, in the midst of this terrifying pressure, Yu Ting's ruler's sword suddenly expanded, becoming 1,000 meters long in the blink of an eye. Sword intent, sword soul, and sword heart instantly fused into one. This was an indescribably terrifying power. Its sharpness was something that Long Houchen had never seen before. If the purple gold Haiyue sword that Haiyue had transformed into was the most powerful sword of destruction, then at this moment, Yu Ting's ruler's sword was the most powerful sword of righteousness. Long Houchen had used the aria of the goddess of light and the blue rain of hibiscus of light as his weapons for a very long time. It could be said that his understanding of the sword had always been manifested through these 2 swords. After the 2 swords fused with Yu Ting, the memories that came with the swords, as well as the understanding that Yu Ting had gained after fusing with Long Houchen, in addition to the effects of Long Houchen's God of Light's bloodline, caused Yu Ting's understanding of the sword to reach a whole new level, and even surpass Long Houchen's. This was because she had once been a sword spirit. Thousands of golden rays flashed in the sky, and it was as if countless golden light pillars had appeared in an instant. The 6 terrifying breaths were stirred up by the golden light and instantly became chaotic. Sword star shower? This was a sword star shower. Long Houchen's eyes widened. That's right. Wasn't the ruler's sword star shower the knight's sword star shower? However, this was also the most powerful version of the sword star shower that Long Houchen had ever seen. In front of the ruler's sword, the huge bodies of the 6 dragons seemed to have become lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The golden light shone, and the ruler's sword that Yu Ting had transformed into spun in the air. In an instant, a thin golden line appeared on each of the dragons' necks, and in the next moment, they completely collapsed. The holy WYRM was dumbfounded. Although his dragon language magic was not guided by the light WYRM as the main body, it was still one of his strongest spells. Yet, it was destroyed by an opponent that was weaker than him just like that. The power of a domain weapon had actually reached such a level. Moreover, why was she able to use the domain weapon even though her cultivation base was not at the 5th rank of the 9th level? From a holy to WRM's point of view, the fusion of Yu Ting and the ruler's sword was clearly the characteristic of the domain weapon. However, in reality, Yu Ting naturally could not use the domain weapon. She had transformed herself into the ruler's sword spirit, and from there, urged the ruler's sword to burst forth with the strongest power. It could be said that the current her had magnified her original ability by 100 or even 1,000 times. After the ruler's sword broke through the holy WRM's magic, it immediately turned around and slashed at the holy WRM's head without hesitation. This time, the holy WRM was a little flustered, and there was no need to mention how sullen it was. Long Houchen's domain had a huge impact on it, and Yiting's domain weapon was so overbearing. In the distance, Long Houchen had not even directly intervened, but the holy WRM was already on the verge of collapsing. With a furious roar, the holy WRM's figure flashed and appeared thousands of meters away. I'm done. I haven't lost. It's just that your domains are too effective against me. Moreover, what's the point of fighting two against one? The golden light receded, and Yu Ting returned to Long Houchen's side in a flash. She glanced at the holy WRM disdainfully and said, I've only used half of my power, and you're already unable to hold on. You didn't say that you couldn't fight two against one, so a loss is a loss. As a holy WRM, do you not even have this bit of magnanimity? If these words had come from Long Houchen, the holy WRM would definitely be very disgruntled, but since it came from Yiting, he could not refute it. The Eastern King fanned the flames from his side and said, Never would I have thought that the mighty holy WRM would actually lose to an elf. Let's see if you still have the face to come to our Easton in the future. The holy WRM snapped. Shorty, don't be so shameless. Is this elf Easton's? Don't flatter yourself. Fine, a loss is a loss. You've passed the second test. You're quite capable to be able to suppress me in terms of domains. Long Houchen nodded at the holy WRM and said, Thank you for your help. The test of the throne of God of eternity and creation was much more difficult than he had imagined. It was also different from what Yang Haoyu had told him before. According to Yang Haoyu's description, the test should not have been this difficult. Although it seemed like Long Houchen had easily passed the test, the truth was that if he hadn't had the light God domain and hadn't been able to complete his evolution, coupled with his intellect and experience, as well as the fact that Yiting had been resurrected in time, both the first and second stages would have been insurmountable. It could be said that his passing these two tests was a combination of wisdom, strength, and luck. Of course, it could also be said that it was the will of the heavens. The holy WRM glanced at Long Houchen and said, Although you've passed my test, it does not mean that you can pass the final test. Your domain will no longer have any advantage in the final test. I suggest that you quickly recover your strength, because the final test is about to begin. Hearing this, Long Houchen was both happy and worried, but he did not hesitate to speed up the rhythm of the heart of eternity. At the same time, he retracted his domain and spread the 6 wings on his back to their maximum. With the help of the Holy Unicorn, he and Yiting fully recovered their spiritual power. He was naturally worried about the test that even the Holy WRM found extremely difficult, but he was naturally happy because the test had finally reached its final moment. If he could pass this final test, it would mean that he would receive the recognition of the eternal and creation throne of God. As Long Houchen and the Holy WRM retracted their respective domains, the sky also became clear again, but there was a trace of strangeness in this clarity. Long Houchen felt as if he was being stared at by something. The voice that had appeared several times before did not give any more hints, and the pressure in the air was getting stronger and stronger. He did not know what the final test was, but after the battle with the Holy WRM, Long Houchen vaguely understood that the most difficult test of the eternal and creation throne of God was not the later test of strength, but the first test, which was a test of humanity and wisdom, especially in the case of being misled. It was very important to find the right path. Perhaps many Changqi who had been tested in the past had failed in this aspect. Yang Haoyu had once told him that there were at least 2 tests that he had failed inexplicably, and he didn't even know why he had failed the test. After trying several times, Yang Haoyu's final conclusion was that true knowledge was revealed from the subtleties, and he couldn't ignore any details during the test. Although the experience he had provided to Long Houchen was a little exaggerated, it had still reminded him, allowing Long Houchen to pass 2 tests in a row. The final test seemed to be a test of strength, but he did not know what kind of cultivation his opponent would have this time. Just as Long Houchen was thinking, a white pillar of light fell straight down from the sky. The pillar of light was not very large, with a diameter of about 10 meters. It appeared 50 meters in front of Long Houchen and was pure white without any attributes. After about 3 seconds, the pillar of light slowly dissipated and a figure appeared in the air. King Easton's exclamation came from not far away. The Eternal Angel. It was a woman with a slender figure. From her overall appearance, she had many similarities with Yi Ting. For example, she was also very beautiful. It was a kind of noble and aloof beauty, but her arrogance seemed to be innate, and it gave people a feeling that it couldn't be more normal. On her back, she also had the same 12 wings as Yi Ting, but the difference was that Yi Ting's wings were transparent, while her wings were feathered. They were somewhat similar to the spiritual wings of humans, but they looked more real. The 12 wings were pure white and flawless. Under the sunlight, they glowed faintly. The holiness made people feel like they could not be profaned. She was also wearing a long white dress. The dress was very simple, but it seemed to fit her perfectly. She had golden hair and golden eyes, but there was no aura of light emanating from her. In her right hand, there was a slender white magic staff. There were no gems embedded on the magic staff, but Long Houchen's gaze was immediately attracted by it. What he saw was not a magic staff, but the sun, the moon, and the stars. The magnificence was far superior to Yang Haoyu's astral god territory. His heart sank. Long Houchen knew very well that this powerful being called the Eternal Angel was much more terrifying than he had imagined. The Eternal Angel glanced at Long Houchen calmly. Her voice was as cold and arrogant as her appearance. "Defeat me, and you will pass the test." As she spoke, she raised the magic staff in her hand high and murmured, "Eternal Lord, grant me your supreme power." The sky turned white in an instant, and an endless oppressive force pressed down on Long Houchen. Although he was very close to the Eternal Angel, Long Houchen felt as though there was an endless gulf between them when he looked at her. Long Houchen subconsciously released his light god domain. However, as soon as the 7-colored golden light appeared, it was immediately forced back by the white light. Long Houchen was shocked to discover that his light god domain, which had always been successful, was actually gradually dissipating under the illumination of the white light. Although it wasn't dissipating very quickly, it was indeed collapsing. It felt as if it had been stripped away by luminous moon's chaotic elements. What exactly was the attribute of her domain? Or did it have no attribute? Long Houchen moved his mind and forcibly maintained his light god domain outside his body, feeling the intensity of the white light. Don't waste your energy. This is the Eternal Lord's eternal domain. You're already in the eternal domain, so how can you fight against the eternal light? The eternal light is the power of chaos, and it can suppress and assimilate any attribute. The Eternal Angel drew an outline with the magic staff in her hand, and a shadow gradually appeared in front of her. At this moment, Yi Ting also made her move. The huge golden sword appeared in the sky again and slashed at the Eternal Angel. She did not care who her opponent was. As long as it stood in front of Long Houchen, she would help her brother destroy it. As soon as the ruler's sword appeared, the white light in the sky immediately turned into streaks of white light and entangled it. In an instant, the ruler's sword seemed to have fallen into a swamp. Although it continuously slashed at the streaks of white light, its power was being rapidly depleted with every passing second. This caused Yi Ting's expression to change drastically. She did not even transform into a sword spirit to enter the battle. Instead, she quickly withdrew the ruler's sword. The scene of Long Houchen dealing with King Easton and the Holy Dragon appeared once again. However, this time, the roles were different. Long Houchen was the one being restrained by the domain. If he continued to fight with the domain, he would soon run out of spiritual power. Moreover, even now, he could not tell what level the Eternal Angel's cultivation had reached. "Brother, use me as your sword," Yi Ting said firmly. She then leapt into the air, and with a flash of golden light, a heavy sword appeared in front of Long Houchin. He was no match for the other party in a domain battle, so he could only rely on his own strength to break through the blockade. However, Long Houchin did not have a weapon, so Yating could only turn herself into his weapon. The huge golden sword was 7 feet long and a foot wide. There were 18 ridges on the blade, making it look extremely sharp. The sword crocodile was covered with overlapping wings, and the hilt was long and slender. From the tip of the sword to the hilt, there was a transparent line that looked like a long gemstone. An extremely sharp aura flickered and pulsed within the line. Chapter 265. The ruler's sword shone with an 8-colored light. Yes, it was one more color than the 7-color god weapon. Its powerful aura even surpassed that of the purple gold Hao-US sword. Moreover, the aura it emitted was pure light ruler's chi, which was more compatible with Long Houchin's light god domain. Long Houchin raised his right hand and grasped the giant sword. His body trembled slightly. The feeling of being connected by blood caused his aura to instantly become one with the ruler's sword. The 8-colored golden light burst forth and turned into a light screen that isolated Long Houchin. The white light that had been weakening Long Houchin could no longer affect him. At the same time, the holy unicorn behind Long Houchin also turned into a 7-colored stream of light and landed on Long Houchin's body. It turned into a set of holy armor and strengthened him. Oh, it can even resist the eternal light? The eternal angel looked at him in surprise. Long Houchin said in a deep voice, "Your primal chaos attribute can indeed communicate with any other attribute. However, if any attribute reaches an extreme level, your primal chaos attribute won't be able to devour it. My light is the purest light. Perhaps my domain isn't a match for yours, but you won't be able to weaken me with your domain either." As he spoke, the 6 wings on Long Houchin's back flapped, and his body turned into a golden light. He appeared in front of the eternal angel like a bolt of lightning. The ruler's sword in his hand shone brightly, and thousands of golden lights shone in all directions. It was his self-created demon-slaying flash. The eternal angel's body became illusory. In the next instant, she was already 1,000 meters away. "Since my domain cannot defeat you, then I'll rely on my own strength." The eternal angel snorted coldly and pointed with her staff. Suddenly, a huge white light expanded in front of her. The white light shot up, and in the blink of an eye, it had already turned into a giant that was 1,000 meters tall. This giant was completely white, and it was completely formed from the power of chaos. It wore white armor and had no weapons. Long Houchin groaned, his body explosively retreating in the air. This time, his complexion changed. This 1,000-meter-tall giant actually gave him the same feeling as when he faced the demon god emperor. Although he was no longer as weak as he was at that time, and didn't feel like he couldn't contend against it, that terrifying pressure was still too great. This eternal angel actually had the same strength as the demon god emperor. Zhao Fu flicked his king's sword upwards and flashed with a golden light as a thick bolt of golden lightning, containing an incredibly sharp sword intent slashed towards the massive figure of light. The figure of light roared furiously, and an explosive sound rang out from his body. A layer of white light gushed out from his body, and the sword intent that Long Houchin had unleashed with his king's sword was actually dispersed just like that. It had to be known that this sword attack of his contained the might of the light of judgment. With the suppression of the domain and the strength of the figure of light, Long Houchin suddenly felt like he was at the end of his rope. The pressure that the figure of light gave him was simply too strong, so strong that even his thoughts were being suppressed. This was an opponent that he could not fight against at all. However, if that was the case, what was the point of the assessment of the throne of God of eternity and creation? Just as Long Houchin was thinking about this, the huge figure of light had already thrown a punch towards him. Long Houchin's eyes narrowed. His willpower was extremely firm. Even when he faced the situation of certain death against the demon emperor, he did not have any intention of admitting defeat. No matter how strong his opponent was, he would definitely not retreat. Holding the king's sword with both hands, Long Houchen's eyes flashed with a divine light. A layer of 7-colored flames suddenly rose up. He was burning his own domain. Even if he had to use up his origin energy, he would not admit defeat. Clang! In midair, the king's sword collided with a huge fist, and 8-colored light shone brightly. The rainbow flames on Long Houchen's body also emitted a dazzling ring of light, and fiercely collided with the fist. However, all of this only felt like an itch to the figure of white light. In the next instant, Long Houchen's body was sent flying like a cannonball. King Easton stared at this scene, dumbfounded. After the eternal angel appeared, the seal that came from the Lord of Nature was also removed. However, there was only disbelief in his eyes when he saw what was happening before his eyes. Old dragon, how is this possible? Even if the eternal angel is more powerful than you and I, she shouldn't be this powerful. The holy dragon transmitted, what do you know? This is a test that the eternal Lord has for that human. The eternal angel has only temporarily obtained the authority to control the eternal domain. If this were the outside world, even 10 of her wouldn't be able to achieve this level of cultivation. King Easton was confused. If that's the case, then what's the point of the test? Who can beat her? The holy dragon said in disdain, what else is there in your brain other than muscles? What do you know? Watch for yourself. King Easton was furious. Damn it, if you say that I know anything again, I'll smash your ass with a hammer. The holy dragon stared at the battlefield without blinking. In response to King Easton's anger, one of its 5 dragon claws extended. However, it was a middle finger. In the air, Long Houchen could only feel the light elements in his body vibrating violently. He only managed to stabilize himself after flying thousands of meters backward. Although the pain from his body was intense, he was surprised that he did not suffer any serious injuries. Instead, the sharpness of the king's sword had left a deep mark on the giant figure of Light's fist. A thought immediately popped up in Long Houchen's mind. The figure of Light's attack did not seem to be as powerful as the pressure it displayed. The figure of Light's attack did not stop. It raised its right hand in the air, and its entire arm turned into a 1,000-meter-long sword that slashed down from the sky. Before the sword even landed, a deep ravine had already appeared on the ground thousands of meters below. King Easton's heart ached. However, he did not dare to rush forward to stop it. The strength displayed by the figure of Light was simply too terrifying. Even if he and the holy dragon worked together, they might not be its match. In the air, all the elemental attributes seemed to have been mobilized in an instant. Long Houchen's body was completely locked down, and he could not dodge at all. Even if the space around him was locked down, he could not escape even if he had the power to travel through space. This feeling was similar to when he was locked down by the 3 demon gods in the Star Demon Tower. His blood surged, and Long Houchen's eyes lit up. The blood in his body was already boiling. The battle in the Star Demon Tower was the greatest failure of his life. Because of that, his beloved Kai heir had endured so much pain to bring him back to life. The same feeling appeared again. The power in Long Houchen's entire body immediately increased explosively. He gripped the king's sword tightly with both hands, and the intense rainbow-colored halo became 8-colored under the influence of the divine sword. An 8-colored beam of light that was only a meter in diameter, but as bright as the sun shot into the sky. A compressed version, the divine light waltz. With the king's sword, which was an existence between a divine weapon and a supreme divine weapon, Long Houchen's domain usage and amplification had undergone a geometric change. Boom! White light danced in the sky, and the powerful cutting power of the divine light waltz forcibly cut off a third of the 1,000-meter-long light sword. When it once again slashed in front of Long Houchen, its momentum was not as great as before. The rainbow-colored light of the sun-moon divine snail shield shone, and turned into a huge shield above his head. However, the power of the light sword was indeed terrifying, and it still smashed Long Houchen hard into the gully on the ground. He spat a mouthful of blood in midair. The figure of light took a step forward and directly stepped on the spot where Long Houchen had been smashed into. It looked like it was not going to give him a chance to live at all. However, it was also at this moment that the light in the sky suddenly changed. The originally bright sunlight suddenly dimmed, and the sun began to set in the west. It seemed like night was about to arrive early. The eternal angel could not help but be stunned by this change. However, the foot of the light sword still stomped down fiercely, and the ground rumbled so loudly that King Easton could not help but close his eyes. With such a terrifying stomp, even if Long Houchen did not die, he would not have many breaths left. The divine stone of the sun and moon. The eternal angel looked at the sky in confusion. The divine stone of the sun and moon was a treasure that contained the purest essence of the sun and moon in nature. With enough power, it could change day and night, and change day and night in advance. It had always been one of Easton's most important treasures. However, the eternal angel had previously heard that the divine stone of the sun and moon had been stolen, but he did not expect it to appear now. If it was not used by King Easton or the Holy Dragon, then it must be Long Houchen. It was also at this moment that the domineering, almost invincible giant of light suddenly trembled. Its movement was not large, but everyone could still see it clearly due to its size. Immediately after, a strange light began to spread from the foot of the giant of light, and its body seemed to have completely solidified. Red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, blue, purple, black, white. The nine-colored light flickered and rose upwards with a special gentleness. As it rose, the alternation of the sun and moon in the sky seemed to freeze. Sunlight and moonlight circled and merged in the sky. The terrifying might of heaven and earth caused the eternal angel, the holy dragon, and King Easton to shudder. No matter how powerful they were still insignificant before the might of heaven and earth. Even gods could not resist the might of heaven, because gods were born from heaven and earth. The nine-colored light soon spread to every corner of the giant of light's body. At this moment, the divine light of the sun and moon in the sky seemed to have completed their final fusion. A huge golden and white pillar of light descended from the sky. The perfect fusion of sunlight and moonlight focused on the 1,000-meter-tall giant of light. Under the eternal angel's dazed gaze, the huge blade of light slowly melted before the might of heaven and earth. The divine light of the sun and moon shot straight into the ground, and a figure slowly rose from the divine light. The holy armor was not stained by the slightest bit of soil. In his right hand was the huge king's sword, while his left hand was raised high above his head. A shield shining with a nine-colored halo was madly absorbing the light of the sun and moon, causing his body to shine with both gold and white. Nine-colored? A supreme artifact? The Holy Dragon and King Easton said almost at the same time. They looked at each other and could clearly see the fear and shock in each other's hearts. The Holy Dragon felt it the most. If Long Houchen had used this supreme artifact during their battle, then he would probably already be. The Eternal Angel was even more shocked. She never expected Long Houchen to be able to destroy the Giant of Light with 1,000,000 spiritual energy points. That was close to the strength of a demigod. Even if it was only condensed from spiritual energy, its overall strength would definitely exceed that of a rank 6 powerhouse. Yes, Long Houchen had activated the ultimate power of the Sun-Moon Divine Snail Shield. The defense of the sun and moon depends on the heart, the guidance of light, the protection of God. Dawn at dawn, sunset at dusk, the sun and moon alternate, the divine snail as the shield. These were the words left behind by the Sun-Moon Divine Snail. Through Long Houchen's constant comprehension, he gradually understood that the Sun-Moon Divine Snail shield could only unleash its greatest power at dawn or dusk, when the sun and moon alternated. The strength needed to activate this power was at least rank 3. In other words, when Long Houchen advanced to rank 3, he could be considered to have truly grasped the power of this supreme artifact. Gold and white light flashed between heaven and earth. The chaotic energy on the Eternal Angel's body seemed to be greatly affected. As her body trembled, the terrifying aura that resembled that of a demon emperor rapidly weakened. The entire world of Easton seemed to become illusory under the illumination of the divine light of the sun and moon. Friend, retract your power, or our eternal realm will be destroyed, King Easton said to Long Houchen urgently. The golden-white light slowly faded. The sun-moon divine snail's shield did not attack again. The sky gradually darkened from the sun to the moon. Long Houchen, who was flashing with colorful light in the sky, appeared even more noble. The 9 colors of the sun-moon divine snail shield had turned back to 7 colors, and its light had dimmed significantly. Long Houchen had already sensed its use when he obtained the sun-moon divine stone. More accurately, the sun-moon divine snail shield had given him a hint. Now, the attack launched with the sun-moon divine stone, and the sun-moon divine snail shield had turned the tide. However, he also sensed that the sun-moon divine snail shield would not be able to unleash its brilliance again for at least 3 days, due to the abnormal rotation of the sun and moon. However, a supreme artifact was a supreme artifact. Its light had dimmed, but Long Houchen had recovered to his peak condition under the illumination of the sun and moon. Looking at the eternal angel from afar, Long Houchen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "I wonder if I've passed your test." The eternal angel's aura at the peak of the 9th tier had completely weakened. It felt like the aura she was emitting now was not much different from that of a holy dragon. Facing Long Houchen, who was holding the sword of the king and was clearly at his peak condition, she knew that she had no chance of winning. Moreover, the brilliance of the sun-moon divine snail shield had given her a huge shock. "You've passed the test." The eternal angel nodded at Long Houchen. At that moment, the entire world of Easton suddenly turned 9-colored. The 9-color divine light slowly circled around Long Houchen. A cold voice echoed in the air. "Wisdom, tenacity, composure, power. You've passed the test of the 3 great artifact spirits. From now on, you are the master of the eternal and creator throne of God. The eternal angel will explain the throne to you in detail." Happiness had come so suddenly, yet so naturally. Long Houchen was a little dazed, and his eyes were a little moist. It had been more than a decade. It had been more than a decade since he had first seen the power of the throne of God. Over these years, he had trained hard and gone through many hardships. Today, he would finally have his own throne of God. It was the ancestral throne of God, the eternal and creator throne that had never been used by anyone before. At that moment, his emotions could not be described with just the word excited. It was an indescribable feeling of carefreeness. It was an acknowledgement of the sublimation of his soul. He suddenly recalled what the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux had said in the Tower of Eternity before he left. "I hold the sun, the moon, and the stars in my hand. There is no one like me in this world." The darkness would eventually shatter under the illumination of the eternal light. "Demon Emperor, I finally have the right to challenge you." In the air, the eternal angel, the holy dragon, and the king of Easton slowly bowed to Long Houchen, who was shining with 9-colored light. The 3 experts said respectfully, "The guardians of the realm of eternity greet you, Master." Long Houchen hurriedly said, "There's no need to be so polite. Please rise." The 3 experts straightened up. The eternal angel said, "Master, are you curious about the 3 tests?" Long Houchen nodded slightly. He had already guessed it, but he needed to confirm it. The eternal angel said, "This is the realm of eternity. I, the eternal angel, guard the sky. The holy dragon guards the sea and all magical beasts. King of Easton guards the earth. Together, we represent a world of eternity and creation. This is called the realm of eternity, and the realm of eternity itself is the inner domain of the throne of God of eternity and creation. Therefore, if you want to obtain the recognition of the throne, you must naturally take the test here. The throne of God of eternity and creation is the throne of the God of creation. It is a true supreme divine artifact, much more powerful than the one in your hand. That shield of yours can only release the power of a supreme divine artifact under special circumstances. It barely touches the edge of a supreme divine artifact. The throne of God of eternity and creation was lost in the starry sky when the God of creation split himself into 100 gods to control all the planes. Guided by fate, it came to your planet, which is the holy demon continent that you are familiar with. It has been waiting for the birth of a new master. The throne of God of eternity and creation was actually the throne of the God of creation. Long Houchen's eyes narrowed slightly as he listened attentively. The throne will bestow upon you the greatest power. With the existence of the throne, it is equivalent to you being granted the position of God by the God of creation. You will never have to worry about the bottleneck of divinity. Long Houchen's heart skipped a beat. Is the bottleneck of divinity you speak of 1,000,000 spiritual energy points? The eternal angel nodded. Yes. The final test for you just now was to use the power of the realm of eternity to simulate 1,000,000 spiritual energy points. According to the instructions of the Eternal Lord, you only needed to last 15 minutes under my attack to pass the test. However, I did not expect you to use a supreme divine artifact to defeat my simulated power. Although that supreme divine artifact of yours is far from being comparable to the throne of God of eternity and creation, it is still within the realm of the throne. Long Houchen asked curiously, "Then who is the Eternal Lord?" The Eternal Angel said with a look of reverence, "The Eternal Lord is a trace of the will that the God of creation left on the throne. He is also the true master of the realm of eternity. However, he will not appear easily. He told me to tell you that when you complete the necessary task, the throne of God of eternity and creation will complete its mission in this world. It will follow the arrangements of fate and head to another plane." Hearing this, Long Houchen completely understood. The throne of God of eternity and creation did not recognize him as its master forever. It could only be regarded as lending it to him, or rather, borrowing it from the holy demon continent. Yes, it was the throne of the God of creation. How could it be used by him forever? At this moment, the 9-colored halo in the sky suddenly became denser. A calm and emotionless voice sounded. Long Houchen, follow the guidance of fate and pursue the true reason why the demons descended 6,000 years ago. Seek the source of the destruction of the world. The eternal and creation throne of God came because of the destruction of the plane and will also return with the restoration of the plane. You are the one chosen by fate. The test is complete. Rings of intense 9-colored halo revolved around Long Houchen's body rhythmically. In the next moment, he only felt that his entire body was immersed in a special power. It was the endless power of chaos, and this power seemed to be changing because of his body. The familiar light attribute began to appear, and it sprouted at an astonishing speed. His soul and body were sublimated in this process of growth and creation. Dragon-resisting pass. Long Xingwu and the members of the Light of Dawn monster hunters were anxiously waiting. It had been a month since the beginning of the confrontation with the aura of the eternal and creation throne of God. However, there was still no news from Long Houchen. As early as 20 days ago, Zhang Fangfang and Han Yu had completed their respective tests and obtained their own throne of God. Now, the Knights Templars also had an unprecedented 5 Knight of the Seal. However, Long Xingwu and the members of the Light of Dawn monster hunters were not happy at all, because the person who was most likely to become the Knight of the Seal in their hearts had not returned. His test was still ongoing. It's already been a month. Why hasn't Boss come out yet? Could something have happened? Lin Xin said anxiously. Chunning glared at him fiercely and said, "Shut your crow's mouth." Kai stood beside Long Xingwu and waited silently. Although she seemed calm, she was actually more anxious than the others. Long Xingwu comforted everyone. There's a month-long test to obtain the recognition of the throne of God. This is something that has never happened before. Because of this, Houchen's chances should be very high. Don't worry. Even if Houchen cannot obtain the recognition of the throne of God, he will not be harmed. Although this was said, he would not be harmed. This only represented the other 5 throne of God. As the primogenitor's throne of God, No one knew to what extent it was truly mysterious. Just as Long Xingwu was comforting everyone, suddenly, everyone felt dizzy. What's going on? Everyone was a powerhouse of the present age. After feeling that something was wrong, they immediately reacted. Immediately after, they discovered that the earth seemed to be trembling. The entire dragon-resisting mountain pass was slightly shaking from the tremors. Could it be the earth dragon turning over? Long Xingwu was aghast. Although the earth dragon turning over was not common on the continent, it was not unheard of. Moreover, once the earth dragon turning over occurred, the losses would be huge. The dragon-resisting mountain pass was one of the 6 impregnable passes of the human race. If a strong earth dragon turning over occurred, the new federation would suffer an incomparable blow. However, the tremors did not intensify. Although the shaking of the dragon-resisting mountain pass alarmed everyone, it was only maintained within a certain range and did not increase in intensity. Suddenly, a terrifying spiritual fluctuation seeped out from the ground without warning. Immediately after, not far from everyone, the sculpture representing the eternal and creative throne of God suddenly lit up. The originally pitch-black sculpture suddenly turned into an incomparably gorgeous 9-colored light. Immediately after, a beam of light shot out from the sculpture and rose into the sky. Strangely enough, this beam of light did not destroy any buildings. However, in the blink of an eye, it had already rushed out of the dragon-resisting mountain and went straight into the sky. Even hundreds of miles away, this strange scene could be seen. The gorgeous 9-colored light shot straight up, broke through the clouds, and flew even higher into the sky. It's the eternal and creative throne of God. Could it be Haochen? Seeing the sculpture of the eternal and creative throne of God light up, Long Xingwu felt as if his heart was being squeezed. This ancestral throne of God had never shown such a change before. What did this mean? A majestic aura spread out from the entire dragon-resisting mountain pass. The demons stationed in the distance were suddenly greatly shocked. They also saw the 9-colored light. For them, that majestic aura had turned into a heavy pressure. In the sky, the 9-colored light gradually expanded, and a huge throne about 100 feet high slowly emerged from the 9-colored light. Its size was really too big. It was impossible for the demons to not see it. The pressure was so terrifying that the low-level demons were terrified. Because of the special nature of the dragon-resisting mountain pass, the demon station here did not have weak existences like the dual-bladed demons. However, because the Holy War had ended several years ago, the strength of the demon station here was not small compared to 4 years ago. Some of the third-grade demons had completely collapsed to the ground while trembling. If the pressure continued to increase, it might take their lives. Unlike the panic of the demons, the experts of the dragon-resisting mountain pass were completely immersed in shock at this time. The sculptures of the 6th throne of God, almost every knight of the 5th grade and above had seen them. The Knights Templars had also always had the Knight of the Seal. However, compared to the huge 9-colored throne of God in front of them, the other throne of God that had once released countless brilliance on the battlefield seemed to be overshadowed. The 9-colored light had a special aura. The 9 colors were shining, but there was not the slightest hint of chaos. Vaguely, behind the throne of God, the 9 colors gradually formed a circle of shining light, and the throne itself gradually turned into the color of a white jade sculpture. The other throne of God seemed to be made of metal. Only this one had a jade-like texture. All the sculptures were still so lifelike, but compared to the black of the sculptures, the lustrous white now gave people a sense of supreme nobility. A light shadow was slowly projected in front of the huge throne of God. The light shadow was wearing a 7-colored divine armor, holding a golden sword that flickered with 8 colors. The armor covered his face, but his stalwart figure was at least 500 meters tall. Slowly, he sat on the incomparable throne of God, as if a real God had descended to the world. The moment he sat on the eternal and creator throne of God, the terrifying pressure reached its peak. On the side of the demons, All the third grade and fourth grade demons instantly exploded in the face of this terrifying pressure, turning into flesh and blood. Yes, that huge shadow was Long Houchen. At this moment, Long Houchen didn't know where he was. He only felt an indescribable great power surrounding him. He used to have the sword of life and creation, and he even comprehended the godly domain technique of controlling the process of life during the evolution of his domain. However, when he sat on this throne of God, it seemed that all his past comprehensions became insignificant. A true will of creation lingered in his heart. The will of eternity also caused the heart of eternity in his chest to gradually calm down. The indescribable enlightenment lingered in his heart. His cultivation was also slowly rising because of this eternal and creation throne of God. The speed of the rise was not fast, but the realm of his mind was also rising. Compatibility, harmony. Long Houchen's will and spiritual power were merging with the eternal and creation throne of God in this wonderful enlightenment. Under the illumination of the nine-colored light of the transcendent artifact, the knight began to kneel on one knee and pay the highest respect to Long Houchen in the air. At this moment, another 3 rays of light shot out from the dragon resisting Mountain Pass. The first one was a golden red light. The huge throne was 10 feet high, and the back of the throne was inlaid with countless gems. Vaguely, one could see a figure floating on the back of the throne. It was fierce, dignified, and could even be said to be a terrifying pressure spreading out from it. At the top of the backrest was a bright red, semicircular gem that looked like a half-sun overlooking the earth. However, its light was a slightly dusky orange-red, and it emitted a terrifying pressure as if the end of the world had come. Long Xingwu proudly floated in the air. This doomsday and slaughter throne of God was the best background for him. As for the other 2 throne of God, one was dark green in color, and the other was light yellow in color. They were also 10 feet high. On the dark green throne of God, there were a total of 1,080 dark green gems inlaid, forming a strange human face pattern, as if it was roaring. And in the center of this human face pattern, there was a relief of a young girl. The young girl's face was full of grief, and her eyes seemed as if they would drip tears at any time. The sadness and the fear around her converged into a strange characteristic. Yes, this was the throne of God of fear and sorrow. Apart from the throne of God of eternity and creation, which was on a different level, this throne of God was ranked first among the 5 throne of God created by humans. At this moment, there was also a person standing in front of it. His eyes were calm and steady. His long hair draped over his shoulders, and his handsome face was filled with excitement. He was looking in the direction of the throne of God of eternity and creation. Han Yu, Long Houchen's loyal follower and retainer knight in the light of Dawn Monster Hunters. At the same time, he was also the owner of the throne of God of fear and sorrow, and had been appointed by the Knights Templars as the Knight of the Seal of Destruction and Forgiveness. The light yellow throne of God had magnificent yellow patterns that expanded outwards in circles, and at the center, there was a huge yellow gem that was 3 meters tall. This yellow gem looked like a vertical eye, and there seemed to be a halo fluctuating inside, flashing with the light of wisdom. In front of this yellow throne of God, Zhang Fangfang was also gazing at Long Houchen and the throne of God of eternity and creation with excitement. Now he, like Han Yu, had also officially become the Knight of the Seal of the Knights Templars. He was the owner of the throne of God of wisdom and spirit, and was appointed as the Knight of the Seal of enlightenment and inheritance of the Knights Templars. At this point, the 6th throne of God of Knights Templars already had their owners, and the overall strength of the Knights Templars had also risen to an unprecedented peak. Long Xingwu's voice sounded, covering the entire dragon resisting Mountain Pass. 20 days ago, the Knights Templars had successively awakened the Knight of the Seal of Destruction and Forgiveness, and the Knight of the Seal of Enlightenment and Inheritance. Today, I would like to announce the greatest joyous event in the 6,000 years since the establishment of the Knights Templars. Our ancestral throne of God finally has its owner, and he is our reorganized Temple Federation's first president, Long Houchin. He has already obtained the approval of the throne of God of eternity and creation. On behalf of the Knights Templars, I confer him the title of Knight of the Seal of Glory and Leadership. From this moment on, he will also be the head of the sixth Knight of the Seal of the Knights Templars and the supreme leader of the Knights Templars. Under the cover of Long Xingwu's voice that was infused with spiritual power, the dragon-resisting mountain pass instantly became silent. About 3 seconds later, cheers like the eruption of a volcano resounded throughout the impregnable mountain pass. Knight of the Seal, Knight of the Seal, Knight of the Seal. They all cheered the same slogan, for the glory of the Knights Templars. Meanwhile, the demon army stationed in the distance quietly pulled out their camp and retreated. They had no choice but to retreat. The throne of God, shining with 9 colored halos, brought them too much pressure. If they continued, who knows what kind of losses they would suffer. Moreover, when the commander of the demons saw that he didn't recognize 3 of the 4 throne of God that appeared in the sky, he realized that the situation was not good. He quickly sent scouts to report to the rear of the demons. This was a major event that would alarm the demon emperor. Long Houchin could feel the cheers of the dragon-resisting mountain pass, but at this time, he couldn't respond because everything in his body was sublimating. Chapter 266. His spiritual power and realm were constantly increasing, and the power of the light god's domain was actually fusing with the power of the eternal domain. The throne of God of eternity and creation fully reflected its great power as a supreme artifact. The pressure of its aura was far from what the other throne of God could compare with. Ding! A melodious crisp sound spread thousands of miles. The throne of God of eternity and creation under Long Houchin suddenly split, turning into 13 pure white halos that rose into the sky. The moment they rose into the sky, the light of the sun in the sky was completely suppressed and dimmed, as if it no longer existed, and 13 brand new suns replaced its original position. Long Houchin looked up at the sky with a hint of fanaticism in his eyes. He raised both his hands at the same time and said, "Fall, my eternal stars." The 13 eternal stars that shone with a dazzling white light descended from the sky and rapidly fused with Long Houchin's body. His 500-meter-tall body also shrank after each eternal star fused with it. When the 13th eternal star completely integrated with his body, he had already returned to the size of a normal person and no longer felt illusory. Everything returned to normal. Long Houchin was still wearing the holy armor, and the eternal and creation throne of God in the sky had completely disappeared. Long Houchin crossed his chest with his right fist and knocked on his left chest. He performed a knight's salute to all the Knight of the Dragon-Resisting Pass. The sonorous sound resounded in Yulong Pass. This was the response of all the Knights Templars Knight on the city wall. Not only these knights, but also the 3 Knight of the Seal in the sky. From this moment on, Long Houchin was not only the chairman of the new federation, but also the unprecedented glory and leader of the Knights Templars, the Knight of the Seal, the leader of the 6th Knight of the Seal. "Dad, I did it." Long Houchin looked at Long Xingwu, while Long Xingwu looked at him with a somewhat dull gaze. His eyes were full of complex colors, including gratification, excitement, and many other unclear emotions. Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang reacted in a completely different way. The two rushed to Long Houchin's side at the same time, picked him up, and threw him high into the sky. At the same time, they each put away their throne of God. However, Long Houchin did not cooperate with his 2 good brothers' celebration. His figure flashed and returned to their side, whispering something in a low voice. Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang's complexion changed at the same time. The 3 of them greeted Long Xingyu and quickly flew back to the dragon-resisting mountain pass. Long Xingwu also did not understand what had happened and hurriedly followed them back. Although the 4 Knight of the Seal did not appear for a long time, but the shock they brought to the dragon-resisting pass still greatly raised the morale of the Knights Templars. Kai Long Houchin impatiently called out as soon as he returned to his companions. Kai fiercely rushed into his embrace like a swallow, tightly hugging him, but could not say a word. The two had just had the most intimate relationship, but Long Houchin had disappeared for a month. For Kai's heart, it was a torment. She had always kept herself strong, because she did not want her companions to panic. After all, when Long Houchin was not here, she was the vice captain. But when her lover finally returned successfully, she could no longer restrain her suppressed emotions. Long Houchin hugged Kai tightly and gently stroked her long hair. The others pretended not to see and turned their heads away. Patting Kai's back, Long Houchin said in a deep voice, "I'm sorry, everyone. I've been undergoing the assessment for too long, and I've made everyone worried. However, I'm afraid we have to take action immediately. Hao Yue can no longer suppress his breakthrough and has begun to attack the bottleneck. We must go immediately, or else it will be too late." Originally, everyone was immersed in the excitement and joy of Long Houchin's return, but after hearing his words, their faces suddenly became serious. They had followed Long Houchin and faced the undead creatures from Hao Yue's world several times, so they were very clear about the horror of those undead creatures. Especially, every time Hao Yue evolved, the strength of the enemy would become stronger. There was even one time when Hao Yue's power completely evolved, and after it was interrupted, its vitality was almost injured. Hao Yue's power could destroy the demon god pillar, and its evolution was crucial to the entire glimmer of Dawn monster hunters. "Boss, we're ready," Lin Xin said proudly. Judging from his expression, it was obvious that his cultivation had improved again. Although everyone's faces were solemn, their eyes were filled with excitement after hearing that Long Houchin was about to go into battle. Even Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang were no exception. Although the undead army was strong, the glimmer of Dawn monster hunters were no longer the same as before, especially since everyone had just changed into epic tier equipment. Which one of them wasn't rubbing their palms together, ready to go into battle and feel the power of their brand new equipment? Kai straightened her body from Long Houchin's arms. She blushed, but didn't say anything. Long Houchin turned to Long Xingwu and said, "Dad, my mount is a creature from another plane. It's about to complete its evolution, and it's likely to be its last evolution. I'll bring my partners to protect it and ensure that it completes its evolution smoothly." Long Xingwu didn't expect his son to leave immediately after completing the test of the eternal and creative throne of God. He couldn't help but ask worriedly, "Can your body take it?" Long Houchin said, "Don't worry, I'm in peak condition now. There won't be any problems. We'll be back soon. It shouldn't take long." Long Xingwu nodded and said, "Be careful." Long Houchin smiled confidently. His companions weren't the only ones who were confident about the upcoming battle. He was the same. With the shield of the Sun Moon Divine Snail and the eternal and creative throne of God, he had the confidence to challenge even the Demon Emperor. Moreover, he was still in the process of fusing with the eternal and creative throne of God, and his cultivation was constantly rising. Based on the current speed of the fusion, his cultivation would most likely break through to Tier 4 once the fusion was complete. A purplish-gold light shone on Long Houchin's forehead, and 9 purplish-gold light patterns glowed with a unique and mysterious luster. Rays of light continuously flashed from Long Houchin's chest, and 9 halos of light fell on the bodies of his companions. This was the ability of the instant flash domain that they had bought from the Demon Hunt Squad's trade center. Under the effects of the flash field, a silver-white halo appeared beneath the feet of every Monster Hunter's member. Immediately after, the purplish-gold light patterns on Long Houchin's forehead shone brightly and instantly merged with the silver-white halo of the flash field. In the next moment, the flash field had completely turned purplish-gold. With Long Houchin as the center, the halos beneath everyone's feet shone brightly at the same time. Space was torn apart, and everyone disappeared without trace. Long Xingwu was also a Knight of the Seal. Of course, he knew how difficult it was for Long Houchin to do what he had just done. The flash field could only strengthen the connection between him and his companions, but the group teleportation depended entirely on his own strength. Even if he had the coordinates, it was too risky to bring 9 people with him to tear apart space and teleport between planes. Even if he had the coordinates, it was too risky. Even Long Haoyu, the Holy Knight of the Stars, would not dare to do such a thing. Naturally, Long Haochen was not afraid. The throne of God of eternity and creation had the magical ability to travel through space. Moreover, his current cultivation and mastery of the domain had reached a whole new level. After everyone entered the space turbulence, Long Haochen's body suddenly emitted a jade-white luster that enveloped everyone's body, turning into a white light shield. They did not suffer any impact. In just a few breaths' time, they had broken through space again and arrived at the plane where Long Haochen was. With a flash of white light, Long Haochen and his companions left space at the same time. Although they had been mentally prepared, they could not help but be shocked when they saw the situation in front of them. As far as the eye could see, there were undead creatures everywhere, not only on the ground, but also in the air. It seemed that the entire space had been filled with undead creatures. This time, Long Haochen did not evolve in the cave. Instead, he quietly crawled on a small hill. An intense purple-gold light shone faintly from his body. Any undead creature that rushed within 100 meters of his body would immediately turn into a purple-gold flame and be burned to ashes. The sudden appearance of Long Haochen's group naturally attracted the attention of the undead creatures. Immediately, the undead creatures launched an attack on them. At least 1,000 flying devil hunters flapped their wings and soared in the sky and spat out crescent-shaped dark green light at them. At this time, although there were no monarch-level powerhouses among the undead creatures that surrounded Hao, they were all undead creatures above the 4th or 5th level. Moreover, they had just arrived and had not fully launched their attack on Hao. Long Haochen raised his left hand, and a layer of 7-colored golden light turned into a huge light shield that enveloped everyone, including Hao. The crescent-shaped green light bombarded the 7-colored light shield, but did not even cause a ripple. The purple-gold light on Hao's body dimmed a little. Long Haochen could sense the fluctuation of his emotions. Due to the arrival of Long Haochen and the rest, he had to start breaking through the bottleneck wholeheartedly. Originally, Hao could still suppress his breakthrough, and there was no need to be so anxious. However, after devouring the sapling of the Tree of Destruction, his power instantly reached a critical point. Even with his power, he could no longer suppress this breakthrough. The message that Hao gave to Long Haochen was simple. This breakthrough would take a very long time. Hao did not say much, and that was because he had complete trust in Long Haochen. Although the flying devil hunters had many attacks, to the light shield formed by the Sun Moon Divine Snail Shield, it was undoubtedly a dragonfly trying to shake a stone pillar. After passing the assessment of the throne of God of eternity and creation, Long Haochen had been in the process of merging with the throne. After that, he immediately came here. Therefore, he was still holding the 8-colored golden sword in his right hand. At this moment, he smiled at his companions. "Let me introduce a friend to everyone." As he spoke, he tossed the king's sword into the air. With a flash of golden light, 12 wings spread out, and Yu Ting appeared in front of everyone. Looking at this unparalleled beauty that they had never seen before, everyone could not help but be stunned. Yu Ting had inherited the body of Queen Yu Yi. In addition to her own characteristics, be it in terms of appearance or temperament, she was not inferior to Kai-Er at all. Seeing her, Kai-Er was also slightly stunned. She looked at Long Haochen in confusion, but she did not suspect anything. In terms of feelings, she had absolute trust in Long Haochen. Their hearts could no longer accommodate anyone else. Long Haochen held Kai-Er's hand and said to Yu Ting, "Greet your sister-in-law." Yu Ting smiled sweetly and bowed to Kai-Er. She said, "Sister-in-law, nice to meet you. I'm Long Yu Ting." Everyone's expression became strange. Lin Xin could not help but whisper to Sima Xian, "Boss is so domineering." He brought a girl back to show her to the deputy leader. Sima Xian nodded in agreement. He said, "I can't compare. I can't compare, Chunninger giggled. She said, you two keep talking nonsense. Be careful that Kai, or we'll teach you a lesson. Is boss that kind of person? Long Yuting, why does it sound so familiar? Kai also looked at the beautiful woman in front of her in surprise. She said, the undead army was pressing on outside. Long Haochen naturally would not let her guess. He smiled and said, it's Yuting. When I was killed by the demon emperor, her elemental body was shattered. Only a trace of her soul was attached to the sword of life and creation. When I was taking the test of the eternal and creation throne of God, the sword of life and creation was shattered. I drew out Yuting's soul and used the power of the domain to help her rebirth. Her current body is from the eternal realms Yi Queen. Yuting's body was originally of the dark attribute. I used my blood to change it. She has my blood flowing in her body, so I let her take my surname. I also have a younger sister. Only then did everyone come to a sudden realization. So Long Yiting was the light elemental fairy Yoting from back then. Chuning said enviously, Yuting, your wings are so beautiful. Long Haochen said, Yuting, Lin Xin, make your move. More and more undead creatures appeared. The long-range attacks were concentrated on the Sun-Moon Divine Snail Shield. The shield kept bursting with dazzling light. Long Haochen's spiritual power consumption was also increasing. Lin Xin and Yu Ting nodded at the same time. Lin Xin raised his right hand. An orange-red light lit up in his palm. Then, the orange-red light extended and turned into a huge staff that was 2 meters long. The fiery red crystal core at the top of the staff was the size of a human head. It did not look like a staff, but more like a scepter. This staff had a domineering name, Immortal Dragon's Fire. Chapter 267. Lin Xion's current appearance was absolutely eye-catching. He was wearing the golden-red radiant praise of the holy fire and holding the immortal dragon fire. Among the current fire mages, there was probably no one who could match up to him in terms of equipment. 2 pieces of immortal-grade equipment were equivalent to 2 pieces of lesser divine equipment. With the immortal dragon fire raised high in the air, Lin Xian did not stop chanting. His chanting speed was extremely fast, but there was a special rhythm to it. The dragon crystal at the top of the immortal dragon fire shone brightly, illuminating the entire 7-colored light shield with a fiery red color. The plane that Hao Yue was in was a world of black and red. Although Lin Xian's chanting was under the protection of the Sun-Moon Divine Snail Shield, as the chanting continued, intense fire elements began to rise from the cracks on the surface of the ground. The cracks widened and the magma surged. Many low-level undead creatures fell into the magma and turned into ashes in an instant. While Lin Xian was chanting, Yiting had already made her move. When Yiting was still a light elemental elf, she mainly relied on magic and mostly assisted Long Haochen. Now, however, she was completely different. She was the light elf queen, and her domain had already determined the direction of her abilities. Yiting pointed her right hand forward, and 8-colored golden flames rose from her body. In a flash, she was out of the protection of the Sun-Moon Divine Snail Shield. A golden greatsword appeared in front of her, and its size increased exponentially. In the blink of an eye, it had become 1,000 meters long. Yiting made a circle with her hands, and the golden greatsword swept across the void. In an instant, the sky filled with undead creatures was cleared. She's too strong. Sima Xian's eyes widened. Not only him, but the others were also dumbfounded. The power of Yiting's attack had completely surpassed theirs. Moreover, Yiting did not have any equipment. Of course, they did not know that Yiting's ability was somewhat similar to that of Qiu Yonghao, the master of the warrior temple. She did not need the assistance of weapons. In front of the king's sword, the low and mid-grade undead creatures were unable to resist at all. Yiting's hands continuously formed various hand gestures in front of her chest, and the gigantic king's sword swept through the air, giving off an aura of supremacy. With each swing of the sword, thousands of undead creatures were reduced to ashes. In just a few breaths, The pressure on the sun-moon divine snail shield had been greatly reduced. "Little sister Yuting, leave some for me." Lin Xian's anxious voice rang out. At that moment, his incantation was completed. A blazing sun appeared above Lin Xian's head. Wasn't that the holy sun incantation that his grandfather had researched? However, the difference between Lin Xian and Lin Shun was that the blazing sun above his head was blue. It was the blue of the heart's flame. At that moment, even the immortal dragon fire had turned blue under the influence of the heart's flame. The blazing sun of the heart's flame slowly rose into the sky, and its size kept increasing. In just a short while, it was already 10 times the size of Lin Chen's holy sun incantation. Within the sun-moon divine snail shield, the temperature rose rapidly. Sima Xian, who was the closest to him, even had a burnt smell on his body. Without waiting for his companions to dodge, Lin Xian had already stepped out of the shield, just like Yiting had done previously. However, the difference was that he appeared above the shield and not in front of it. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Lin Xian's mouth, and he said, "Your world doesn't have a sun, so I'll give you one." As he spoke, he pointed the immortal dragon fire upwards. Instantly, the huge blazing sun rose into the sky. In the process of rising, a blue pillar of fire descended from the sky, enveloping Lin Xian's body. The pillar of fire retracted, and Lin Xian's body disappeared. Wherever the blue light of the holy sun shone, all the cracks in the magma instantly split open, and a large amount of magma spewed out. The area within a radius of 10 miles was instantly turned into a sea of fire. Sima Xian was shocked and said, "Why did Brother Yuting disappear? Did he play with fire and burn himself?" Han Yu laughed and said, "You should hope for the best. Lin Xian has also comprehended a domain, and he's imitating a domain for me. This holy sun spell is really amazing. If Grandpa Lin knew that the magic that he's been researching for his entire life was carried forward by Lin Xian, he would definitely be proud of him." The eruption of magma immediately caused a large number of undead creatures to panic. Even the 6th and 7th grade undead creatures did not dare to let the magma fall on them. For a moment, the pace of their attack was greatly reduced, and after the magma erupted, the concentration of fire elements in the air suddenly increased. One could see that the holy sun above Lin Xian's head began to shrink, and the light of the holy sun became even more scorching. Borrowing the power of heaven and earth was what mages were best at, and a mage with a domain could definitely play a terrifying role on a battlefield with many enemies. Lin Xian's attack began. Blue sparks that looked like tiny sparks began to fly out from the holy sun. These sparks were very small when they first appeared, but as they flew, they rapidly absorbed the fire elements in the air, and their size increased at an alarming rate. When they bombarded the ground or the air, they had already become terrifying fireballs with a diameter of more than a meter. Holy Sun spell, flaming meteor shower of the heart. Terrifying roars began to burst forth in this world of black and red. Amidst the deafening roars, large numbers of undead creatures fell like wheat being reaped. Since the undead creatures nearby had been wiped out by Yu Ting, Lin Xian's flaming meteor shower of the heart flew further away. Every flaming meteor shower of the heart would blast the ground with a diameter of at least 100 meters, and more magma would erupt from the ground. Furthermore, Lin Xian's flaming meteor shower of the heart seemed to have no end. Under the crazy bombardment, the small hill where Long Haochen and the rest was gradually turned into an isolated island in the sea of fire. Seeing Lin Xian and Yu Ting erupting with battle strength, Long Haochen's eyes became even more confident. In a bright glimmer of light Demon Hunt Squad, he definitely wasn't the only powerful one. However, he also understood that the battle had just begun and the truly powerful undead creatures hadn't appeared yet. For example, the Lich King from last time, who had such terrifying strength that he could even summon an army of bone dragons. Looking through the flames and into the distance, Long Haochen's heart sank. Under the attacks of Lin Xian and Yu Ting, The number of undead creatures was decreasing at an alarming rate. However, there were more undead creatures rushing over from the distant horizon, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Could it be that all the undead creatures in this world had been mobilized for Hao Yue's evolution? Lin Li turned to look at Hao Yue. At this moment, it was crawling on the ground like a statue. Purple gold scales covered its entire body, and its 6 heads were entangled together. There was a special kind of stillness about it. My good brother, no matter how difficult it is, I'll definitely protect you. I won't let the scene of you being interrupted when you were evolving your 6 heads happen again. At this moment, a monstrous pressure appeared in the distance. The pressure did not appear from one direction, but from all directions at the same time. Lin Xian's originally extremely bright holy sun immediately became much dimmer in the face of this terrifying pressure. Even the holy sun domain that he had just comprehended could not contend with this pressure. He had no choice but to stop his attack and return to the protection of the sun-moon divine snail shield. Compared to Lin Xian, Yiting's cultivation was clearly much stronger. Looking into the distance, the king's sword returned to its original position, still hanging high in the sky. It's here, the truly powerful enemy has finally appeared. The black sky gradually turned into a vast gray under the terrifying aura. The terrifying pressure even caused the entire space to distort slightly. In the distance, the undead army that had been constantly advancing stopped in their tracks. Even the flying undead creatures that were soaring in the sky rapidly landed on the ground. They were kneeling, crawling on the ground, and kowtowing devoutly. From different directions, 9 rays of light appeared. Long Haochen squinted his eyes and said, "Yiting, come back." Yiting's figure flashed, and she withdrew the king's sword. She also returned to the protection of the sun-moon divine snail shield. Long Haochen murmured, 9 rays of light, but 10 auras. The weakest one has a spiritual energy value of more than 200,000, and the strongest one has a spiritual energy value of about 700,000. These guys should be the rulers of this world, Hao Yue. They should have also sensed that Hao Yue's evolution has reached its final stage, and this time, they've turned out in full force. Although Long Haochen's voice was not loud, every one of his companions could hear him clearly. However, none of them showed any signs of nervousness. The 10 powerful undead creatures all had a spiritual energy value of more than 200,000, which was completely above them. Moreover, this was the world of the undead, so it would be much more troublesome for them to recover their spiritual energy. However, would they be afraid? Back when they helped Long Haochen resurrect in the Tower of Eternity, they no longer had the word fear in their hearts. Although the enemy was strong, they had more confidence in themselves. Moreover, they also had more confidence in Long Haochen. He was the Knight of the Seal of Glory and Leadership, and he had the approval of the Transcendental Artifact. So what if the enemy was strong? They could also persevere until the moment of victory. The 9 figures gradually became clearer. At a glance, Long Haochen saw the Lich King who fought with him during Hao Yue's evolution. He still couldn't see her face, but the Lich King's aura seemed to have become stronger. Just by hovering there seemed to be countless resentful spirits wailing around her. However, her aura was so strong, but her strength was not among the top 3 among the 9 figures. Long Haochen's gaze flashed past the Lich King and then fell on the figure in front of him, which was also the place where 2 powerful auras merged. The first thing that came into view was a special bone dragon. The bone dragon skeleton was a strange bluish-white color. Its bones were white, but there was a layer of blue light on the outside. Its skeleton was strong, and under its huge wings, there was also a strong skin membrane. Around the bone dragon's body, there was a sticky dark aura that was like a dark cloud, turning into a black halo that slowly spread outwards. In the bone dragon's eyes, there was a man shrouded in dark armor, sitting on the bone dragon's back. This man was more than 5 meters tall, and he sat quietly at the junction of the bone dragon's neck and back. In his right hand, he held a heavy sword that was even longer than his height. The heavy sword was shining with a dazzling dark purple light. That's right, it's him. It's his aura that made Long Houchen's expression turn solemn. The knight riding the bone dragon. No, it should be the knight riding the bone dragon king. Just the bone dragon king beneath him had a spiritual energy value of over 300,000, and he himself was a terrifying existence that had a spiritual energy value of over 700,000, just as Long Houchen had said before. Apart from him and the Lich King, the other undead creatures also represented the pinnacle of the undead race. They were the skeleton sovereign that was more than 30 meters tall, and its entire body shone with a white jade luster. The crypt demon spider sovereign that was 20 meters tall, and its 12 long legs stood in the air. Its purplish-black body was covered with gray spots of light. The zombie sovereign that was 5 meters tall, and its entire body shone with a dark golden luster. Its eyes were lifeless, and its limbs were stiff. The abomination sovereign that was more than 100 meters tall, and its waistline was even larger than its height. Its entire body was covered in pale white fat. The vengeful spirit sovereign that was completely covered in a dark green fog, and it was constantly screaming. The shadow sovereign that was completely black, but it was as illusory as a shadow, and its facial features could not be seen at all. The hellfire sovereign that was 100 meters tall, and it was slightly thinner than the abomination sovereign, but it looked even stronger. Its entire body was covered in shimmering purplish-red stones. If the bone dragon sovereign that the knight was riding was included, then at this very moment, the light of dawn monster hunters were about to face the 10 most powerful sovereigns of this plane. The 10 sovereigns slowly approached in the boundless gray sky. One could see that below them were the undead races that they each controlled. That undead army that seemed to have no end. How could it be limited to just 1 million? Why? Why do you want to protect Austin Griffin's evolution? Don't you know that he is a symbol of destruction and destruction? Get out of the way, powerful beings from another plane. Otherwise, today will be the day of your destruction. I am the Terror Knight Sovereign, the Undead Judgment Knight. My words represent the 10 sovereigns of my race. The holy armor on Long Houchen's body flashed, and he turned back into the Holy Unicorn. He rode on the Holy Unicorn Star King's back and looked at the Undead Judgment Knight from afar. He said calmly, I don't know what destruction is in your words, nor do I know what Austin Griffin is. I only know that Hao Yue is my partner, my brother. If you want to destroy his evolution, then you are my enemy. The purplish-black flames in the depths of the Undead Judgment Knight's eyes danced violently, and the auras of the other 9 undead sovereigns instantly became more and more powerful. With furious roars, they pressed towards them at the same time. Previously, the strength of Lin, Xian, and Yiting had sufficiently allowed them to see the strength of these powerhouses from another plane. Otherwise, the Undead Judgment Knight wouldn't have called them powerful beings from another plane. They knew that the number of undead was already useless against these powerful beings from another plane. Only they had the possibility of defeating these powerful beings from another plane. Long Houchen said in a low voice, Wenjiao, Duan, Yi, the 2 of you guard Hao Yue and guard against other undead creature sneak attacks. The others, find your own opponents. The Undead Judgment Knight is mine. Don't fight to the death with your opponents, and do your best to protect yourselves. What we need to do is to buy time for Hao Yue to evolve. The Light of Dawn Monster Hunters, including Yiting, had a total of 11 people. Although Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi were also on the verge of breaking through to the 9th rank, there was still a gap between their strength and that of the others. In a one-on-one fight, the Light of Dawn Monster Hunters definitely wouldn't have the upper hand. However, the overall strength of the enemy was too strong, and Long Houchen didn't dare to let them concentrate their strength on them. They had to widen the battlefield. Silver-white halos appeared under everyone's feet. It was the Instant Flash domain. With the Instant Flash domain and the soul chains, Long Houchen was confident that he could protect his companions. Just as the 10 Lords of the Undead knew that the low-level undead were not enough to threaten Long Houchen and the others, Long Houchen was also very clear that if the opponents were to attack freely, they wouldn't be able to hold on for too long by simply defending. After all, Not everyone in the Light of Dawn monster hunters was good at defense. Only by widening the battlefield could they avoid the concentration of the enemy's strength. Long Houchen's opponents were undoubtedly the Undead Judgment Knight and the Bone Dragon King. These two powerhouses could be said to be the mainstays of the 10 Lords of the Undead. Their combined spiritual energy was probably close to 1,000,000. Long Houchen would have to bear the greatest pressure if he faced them alone. However, on the other hand, this was also the best opportunity for him to test his own strength and familiarize himself with the throne of God of eternity and creation. After all, without strong enough opponents, how could he stimulate all his potential? The Holy Unicorn didn't transform into a mystical armor this time. When Long Houchen flew out, it still stayed there, its dazzling wings spread out, and the horn on its head exuded a soft 7-colored halo. A strange sound was constantly coming out of its mouth, as if it was chanting, but it wasn't as clear as the Holy Dragon's dragon rain magic. This process lasted for about 7 seconds. Just as Long Houchen was about to face the enemy, it had already turned into a 7-color divine light and instantly caught up to Long Houchen's body. The Holy Unicorn disappeared, and what was left on Long Houchen's body was a necklace flickering with a 7-colored halo. Rich and pure light elements instantly spread throughout Long Houchen's body, strengthening him in all aspects. As Long Houchen's abilities grew stronger and stronger, the Holy Unicorn's help to him was also decreasing. It knew that whether it was armor or weapons, it was no longer the best choice for Long Houchen. Thus, it used a shape-shifting technique to turn itself into a necklace and strengthen Long Houchen with all its strength. In any case, a rank 9 Holy Unicorn was equivalent to a divine weapon. Moreover, when Long Houchen obtained the throne of God of eternity and creation, the Holy Unicorn had already derived its own domain. Divine Domain. Transmute all attributes into the power of divine light. It seemed like a simple transformation ability, but this domain consumed very little energy from the Holy Unicorn. In this world where the element of light was scarce, it had an enormous effect. Thus, when the Holy Unicorn transformed into a necklace and wrapped itself around his neck, exuding the might of the divine domain, Long Houchen's face was filled with pleasant surprise. When the undead Judgment Paladins saw that the enemy had dispersed and were facing the 10 monarchs, he understood that there was no point in negotiating. Only by killing these enemies from another world could they stop the terrifying Austin Griffin from completing his evolution. The 6 wings on Long Houchen's back flapped, and the Holy Unicorn's necklace flickered with a 7-colored golden light. Coupled with his handsome appearance, he was definitely eye-catching. However, when the Necromancer Knight saw him flying towards him, the soul fire in his eyes pulsed with disdain. His cultivation was the strongest, so he was the only one who could sense that Hao Yue's evolution would definitely take a long time. However, he still did not dare to be negligent. The earlier he interrupted its evolution, the greater the chance of completely destroying it. Roar! The Bone Dragon King spat out an icy blue breath straight at Long Houchen. It was telepathically connected with the Necromancer Knight. Through the Necromancer Knight's perception, the Bone Dragon King also understood that Long Houchen's cultivation was not even at the 4th level of level 9 and was not much stronger than it. Moreover, it believed that it had an advantage in terms of physical strength. Faced with the Bone Dragon King's breath, Long Houchen did not dodge. He raised his left hand, and the Sun Moon Divine Snail Shield shone with a 7-color divine light, turning into a shield with a diameter of 2 meters, completely protecting his body. The icy blue breath bombarded the 7-colored Sun Moon Divine Snail Shield. Immediately, a circle of icy blue light exploded around Long Houchen's body. The temperature dropped rapidly, and there were even countless ice shards in the air. Even the Sun Moon Divine Snail Shield in Long Houchen's hand was covered with a layer of sparkling icy blue light. What a powerful combination of dark and ice magic breath. This should be the Bone Dragon King's innate magic. Compared to the Bone Dragon King, the Yu Yi Queen Incy's ability was much weaker. As the Bone Dragon King spat out its breath, Its huge body also dashed towards Long Houchen. At the same time, the Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, also took out his purplish-black greatsword. Behind him, a billowing black fog surged, turning into a hideous ghost face. The terrifying pressure made the space around Long Houchen burst out with a sizzling sound, as if it was corroded by darkness. At this moment, a golden halo spread out from Long Houchen's body. It was the light god's realm. Pure light elements instantly dispelled the darkness around his body. At the same time, a layer of white halo spread out from Long Houchen's body. It blended with the colorful golden light of the light god's realm and directly collided with the Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, and the Bone Dragon King. As the two monarchs of this plane, when the white halo appeared, the Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, and the Bone Dragon King were slightly shocked because they felt an indescribable fear, as if their soul fires were under great threat. What is this aura? The Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, did not dare to be negligent. He pointed the greatsword in his hand towards the sky and also released his own realm. The purplish-black halo spread out, enveloping him and the Bone Dragon King. The two realms collided violently in the air. A large amount of light fog filled the air. There was no collision, but it was like ice and fire fighting against each other. Within a radius of 1,000 meters, the purplish-black light fog mixed with the colorful golden light fog rose up. One could clearly see that the purplish-black light was suppressed by the colorful golden light. Every time the colorful golden light was consumed, the purplish-black light would be consumed at least 3 times. Realm suppression. The confrontation between light and darkness should be evenly matched. Moreover, the Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, thought that his cultivation was far higher than Long Houchen's. However, he never expected that when the two realms collided, he would be the one at a disadvantage. The two completely opposite attributes suppressed each other, which could only mean one thing. Long Houchen's realm was far higher than his own. However, Long Houchen did not feel good either. Although his God of Light realm was far superior to his opponent's Dark Judgment realm in terms of level, his cultivation was far inferior to his opponent's. Above the 9th rank, each level was a step higher. The Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, had just reached the 7th rank of the 9th rank and was the most powerful person in this plane. Although his realm was not as good as the God of Light realm in terms of level, it was more than 3 times stronger than the God of Light realm in terms of quantity. Therefore, Long Houchen did not gain the upper hand in this collision of realms. Moreover, don't forget that the Necromancer Knight, Judgment Knight, was riding on a Bone Dragon King that was equally powerful. Roar, roar, roar. The Bone Dragon King roared 3 times in a row, and 3 icy blue breaths were shot out at the same time. However, they were not aimed at Long Houchen. The 3 breaths formed a triangle in the air, and icy blue rays shot out from each of the 3 breaths. Then, an extreme chill appeared on Long Houchen's body, and in the center of the triangle, a dark blue black hole appeared. A faint blue light flickered, and in the next instant, a dark blue light that was only as thick as an arm shot towards Long Houchen's chest. Realm skill. This was clearly the Bone Dragon King's realm skill. At this moment, Long Houchen did not dare to hold anything back. The silvery white halo around his body blazed, and a majestic aura turned into a lustrous white pillar of light that suddenly burst forth from his body. Then, in the air, an intense 7-colored flame was spat out from the lustrous white pillar of light. The flame rapidly shrank in the air, and when it came into contact with the Bone Dragon King's realm skill, the ice blue rays, it had already shrunk to the same thickness as the Bone Dragon King's. Boom! Light flashed in the sky, and the ice blue triangle formed by the Bone Dragon King was instantly shattered. The 7-colored rays also turned into layers of rainbow light that spread out in the air. At the same time that the lustrous white pillar of light appeared, Long Houchen's light god domain instantly blazed, and the spectral Judgment Knight, who was gradually suppressing him with his realm skill and was about to attack, was shocked. He had no choice but to activate his realm skill with all his might to resist it. A huge throne appeared in the air. The lustrous white throne itself released a magnificent nine-colored radiance, and on the back of the throne, there were fine reliefs that gave off an indescribable sense of beauty. At the top of the throne were the sun, moon, and stars, while in the middle were birds and beasts, and connected to the throne were the scenes of nature. On the armrests of the throne were the statues of the holy WYRMS and the 12-winged angels. As soon as it appeared, the nine-colored halos released by its body immediately became the focus of the audience. Fortunately, the undead creatures below were still far away and were not directly affected. Even so, when it appeared, the black and red world seemed to have been purified, and the air became much purer. Long Houchen's body floated in front of the throne of God. This was the first time he activated the power of the eternal and creative throne of God. It was a wonderful feeling, as if he had an invincible backer. No matter how strong the enemy was, the moment the eternal and creative throne of God appeared, all the pressure turned into nothingness. The undead Judgment Knight and the Bone Dragon King were indeed shocked. The aura emitted by the eternal and creative throne of God was too terrifying. They were all undead creatures, and the source of their power was their soul fire. When the eternal and creative throne of God appeared, their soul fire trembled violently. Even the powerful undead Judgment Knight was no exception. The trembling that came from their souls made them want to turn around and run immediately instead of continuing to fight. However, they could not run away. Austin Griffin was about to complete his evolution, and once his cultivation level increased again, no one in this world would be able to restrain him. At the same time, given his habits, all the undead creatures present might not have a chance to survive and would be completely destroyed by him sooner or later. In that case, they might as well fight. Long Houchen's calm voice was heard. Undead monarch, I have no intention of becoming your enemy. As long as you retreat and stop disturbing Hao Yue's evolution, we will not hurt any of you. The undead Judgment Knight said coldly, retreat and death will lead to the same outcome. Do you think that you can stop us with a supreme artifact? No, you're wrong. We are the true masters of this land that has been covered by darkness and fire. As he spoke, he slowly raised the purplish-black greatsword in his hand. On the ground, all the Fear Knight let out an angry roar at the same time. Then, countless dark air currents swept up from below and attacked the body of the undead Judgment Knight. At the same time, his aura became stronger and stronger. In the face of the pressure of the eternal and creation throne of God, he exuded a strong, unyielding will. With the help of his subordinates, he stabilized his soul fire. As the Bone Dragon King roared, it led the undead Judgment Knight to attack Long Houchen once again. Since words could not stop the opponent, he could only rely on his strength. The eternal and creation throne of God instantly turned into 13 balls of white light and dispersed behind Long Houchen. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. The advancing speed of the undead Judgment Knight and the Bone Dragon King was greatly reduced due to the strange change in time. The balls of milky white light were like rivers flowing into the sea, finding different positions on Long Houchen's body. The first ball of white light landed on Long Houchen's chest. Instantly, a huge transparent gem appeared on Long Houchen's chest. It was like a complete round gem that was divided into two parts and embedded on his chest and back. The gem was nearly half a foot in diameter and almost covered most of Long Houchen's chest. After it was embedded, a bright white light immediately spread to the surroundings and turned into a special metal that covered Long Houchen's chest and back. Patterns of the sun, moon, and stars appeared on the metal, as well as countless strange patterns. The second ball of white light landed on Long Houchen's head and turned into a bright white crown. There were 9 gems on the crown, shining in 9 different colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, black, and white. The 9 colors shone and exuded an aura of absolute dominance. The crown tied Long Houchen's golden hair to the back of his head. The moment it landed on Long Houchen's head, a bright white mask fell from the front. Where the eyes should be, there were 2 golden gems shining with dazzling light. When the mask fell, Long Houchen's body was filled with endless majesty. The third and fourth ball of white light landed on Long Houchen's shoulders. The white light spread downwards and became a perfect necklace with a breastplate. On the left shoulder plate, there was a huge dragon head, and on the right shoulder plate, there was a statue of a 12-winged angel. It was obviously the armrest of the eternal and creator throne of God. The bright white armor spread all the way to his arms, completely covering Long Houchen's arms and hands. There were countless fine patterns inscribed on it. Because there were too many types of creatures, if one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to see the patterns at all. They could only feel the nobility and magnificence of the armor. The fifth ball of white light landed on Long Houchen's waist. The waist armor was in the shape of fish scales, and every scale was engraved with a pattern that seemed to be a plant. The waist armor spread downwards and gave birth to a pleated battle skirt. The battle skirt seemed to have a pattern of a holy dragon coiled around it, turning into a bright white halo. The sixth and seventh ball of light landed on Long Houchen's legs. There were countless plant patterns engraved on them, completely covering both of Long Houchen's legs and feet. At this point, Long Houchen's entire body was completely covered by the armor of eternity. The eighth and ninth ball of light landed on his back after being covered by the card of eternity. Long Houchen's original 6 golden wings disappeared and were replaced by a huge pair of bright white wings. This pair of wings was larger than the previous 3 pairs combined, and it completely protected Long Houchen's back. Even when he folded them, they still protruded high up from his back. The 10th ball of light landed on Long Houchen's hand and turned into a huge, lustrous white sword. The design of the huge sword was very simple. There were no gorgeous decorations, not even a pattern. However, on its lustrous white body, there was a 9-colored radiance. This was the only weapon that the throne of God of eternity and creation had given to Long Houchen, the sword of eternity. The last 3 balls of white light hit the huge heart-protecting gem on Long Houchen's chest and then bounced back. During the process of bouncing back, only one of the balls of white light remained bright white, while the other 2 became rainbow and jade green. The 3 balls of light were like loyal guards, circling and circling around Long Houchen's body. The entire process sounded very complicated, but in fact, it was completed in a few breaths' time. This was the power of the supreme divine weapon, the throne of God of eternity and creation. Chapter 268. The throne of God of eternity and creation transformed into the armor of eternity and covered his entire body. Long Houchen felt as if he had truly reached the realm that Electrolux, the scourge of undead, had described, where he could grasp the sun, moon, and stars. He held the eternal sword horizontally in front of him, and a towering sword will seem to materialize in the air. Clang, with a crisp sound, the eternal sword blocked the spectral Judgment Knight's purplish-black greatsword. The pitch-black fog transformed into a hideous demon that tried to devour Long Houchen in a frenzy. 9-colored light shone and collided with the black fog, shattering it in an instant. Long Houchen shook his arm, and an immense force burst forth, forcing the spectral Judgment Knight, who was riding on the Bone Dragon King, to retreat 100 meters. At the same time, the dark elements in the air also rapidly merged with Long Houchen. After passing through the 9-colored light, they turned into pure, non-elemental elements and merged with Long Houchen's body. With eternity in hand, the world is mine. Long Houchen did not know to what extent his power had reached. He could only feel that the light god's domain and the eternal domain had completely merged, and the power that he could command seemed to have no end. This was the first time he had used the throne of God of eternity and creation. Countless insights emerged in his heart, and countless information from the throne of God flowed into his soul, which he continuously accepted and absorbed. This way, he did not take the initiative to attack the spectral Judgment Knight. The spectral Judgment Knight was a little anxious. The power of the transcendental artifact was much stronger than he had imagined. Although Long Houchen's cultivation was clearly far inferior to his, he could not gain the upper hand in the fight. He and the Bone Dragon King roared at the same time, and once again charged at Long Houchen, launching an all-out attack. The Eternal Sword in Long Houchen's hand danced up and down as though he was taking a stroll in his own backyard. He continuously dispelled the attacks of the two undead lords. No matter how they attacked, Long Houchen just floated there without budging an inch. The nine-colored sword light flashed out and blocked their attacks again and again. While Long Houchen stabilized the situation on his side, the battles on the other sides had also begun in full swing. Kai was looking for the Dark Shadow King, whose body was completely black yet illusory like a shadow, and whose facial features couldn't be seen at all, because she could feel that this Dark Shadow King's strength was extraordinary, even more frightening than the Lich King. Sure enough, an accident happened as soon as she faced the Shadow King. The Grim Reaper scythe shone brightly, and Kai brushed past the Shadow King like a bolt of lightning. However, she was shocked to find that her Grim Reaper scythe did not hit the physical body. Instead, it seemed to have swept through the air. When she turned around, she saw that the Shadow King was less than 100 meters away from Hao Yue, who was in the midst of evolution. Not good. Kai was shocked. A strong white light burst out of her body and instantly covered 1,000 meters, forming a white light screen in front of the Shadow King. The Shadow King did not seem to care at all and forcibly crashed into the light of purification. However, he did not succeed this time. Seeing that his black shadow body came into contact with the light of purification, a shrill soul scream erupted, and the Shadow King's body rebounded even faster than before. Kai snorted coldly and thought to herself, "You could be unaffected by my physical attack, but do you think you could be unaffected by the light of purification?" There was no one more suitable than Kai's power to fight against undead creatures. Her most powerful ability from the Grim Reaper's inheritance was to purify the undead. Although the Shadow King's cultivation was extremely high, his soul was still burned by the light of purification due to his carelessness. At the same time, Kai raised her left hand. With a flash of golden light, a small golden 7-story pagoda appeared on her palm. Streams of different colors shone and were released from the pagoda, flying rapidly towards Hao Yue on the ground. The Grim Reaper scythe in Kai's hand turned into thousands of light shadows in the air. The purification domain was fully activated, and it rushed towards the Shadow King. There were a total of 12 streams of light that shot out from the Tower of Eternity. When they landed, they formed a circle, protecting Hao Yue. Weren't they the 12 holy guards who had tested the light of dawn many times in the Tower of Eternity? The holy law of necromancy, Calamity Necromancer Electrolux, did not only leave the Tower of Eternity to Kai, but also the 12 holy guards who had followed him on the battlefield and made countless contributions to Kai. However, because the Tower of Eternity had been lowered from the edge of a supreme artifact to a divine artifact, the strength of the 12 holy guards had also been weakened to a certain extent. They were only at the elementary stage of the 9th rank and did not have the ability of a domain. Even so, they were still 12 9th rank powerhouses with thousands of years of combat experience. During the competition in the temple, if the use of weapons had not been allowed, Kai would have been almost invincible with the Tower of Eternity. Even Long Houchen was no match for him. Of course, now that he had the supreme artifact, the throne of God of Eternity and creation, Long Houchen's overall strength was unparalleled in the team. The 12 holy guards had thousands of years of combat experience. With them guarding Hao Yue, even if these kings broke through the blockade of the light of dawn monster hunters, they would not be able to hurt Hao Yue directly. Yang Wenjiao and Duan were guarding the place closest to Hao Yue. Watching the battle in the air, both of them were a little dazzled, especially when the throne of God of Eternity and creation appeared. The shock in their hearts had risen to the peak. At this moment, Yang Wenjiao no longer had the thought of comparing with Long Houchen in his heart, because he knew that he would never be able to catch up with Long Houchen even if he exhausted his entire life. The Shadow King's strength was indeed as strong as Kai had expected. After his soul was injured, he quickly stabilized his footing. Great airflow spread from his body. Even when it encountered the light of purification, it did not dissipate. Instead, the area it covered became larger and larger, circling a battlefield between him and Kai-Er. The cold aura attacked Kai-Er. Kai-Er held the Grim Reaper's scythe, but she did not act rashly. The purification domain continued to spread, but did not spread too wide. It only maintained a diameter of about 20 meters. With such a distance as a buffer, no matter which side the Shadow King attacked from, she would have time to react. Suddenly, she felt a chill behind her back. Kai-Er turned around almost instantly without hesitation, and the Grim Reaper's scythe slashed out with a touch of cold lightning. Grim Reaper's 7 ultimate, Death of Death. Ding! With a crisp sound, the Sovereign Shadow King's body disappeared in a flash. The layer of dusky luster around his body actually blocked Kai-Er's light of purification outside, but he didn't stay in the domain of purification for long, retreating after one strike. Kai-Er's eyes narrowed slightly. She knew that she had encountered an unprecedentedly strong enemy. As an assassin, she was ambushed and attacked by the Shadow King at this time. However, she had no other choice. In terms of stealth ability, she was far inferior to the opponent. The Shadow Sovereign's domain might have nothing to do with attacking, but it definitely had a huge amplification to his concealment and resistance. Otherwise, even the light of purification wouldn't have been blocked outside. However, Kai-Er knew that this Shadow Sovereign was an undead creature, and as long as it was an undead creature, it would be restrained by the light of purification. The opponent might be able to resist the light of purification for a short period of time, but after a long time, he still wouldn't be able to resist. Otherwise, with the Shadow Sovereign's strength, he would have chosen to fight her head-on, instead of using this kind of guerrilla tactics. Do you want to exhaust my spiritual power? Kai-Er revealed a sneer at the corner of her mouth. Although her cultivation was far inferior to Long Houchen's, the recovery ability of the purification domain under any circumstances was not inferior to Long Houchen's light god domain. Especially in this place full of undead creatures, the purification domain was constantly purifying the death aura. At this moment, a chill suddenly appeared from the side. Kai-Er's Grim Reaper's scythe slashed out again. There was another crisp ding sound. This time, Kai-Er's body shook violently, and her expression changed. The Shadow King's attack power was very strong. Even with the evolved Grim Reaper scythe in her hand, Kai-Er was also greatly shaken. Moreover, she could only discover the opponent when he was close, which was undoubtedly very passive. The Shadow King did not have a physical body and seemed to exist only in the form of a soul. This meant that physical attacks had no effect on him. If she continued to be beaten like this, the situation for Kai-Er was also becoming more and more disadvantageous. This was because she could only fight the opponent with the 7 ultimate Reaper scythes, and the consumption of the 7 ultimate Reaper scythes could be imagined. Just like Long Houchen against the Undead Judgment Knight and the Bone Dragon King, Kai-Er was also in a stalemate. However, the difference was that Long Houchen was suppressing his opponent, while Kerr was being suppressed here. Kai-Er went for the Shadow King, while Yu-Ting went for the Vengeful Spirit King. These two kings had one thing in common, which was that they did not have a physical body. Apart from the Undead Judgment Knight, they were the two most difficult to deal with. At this time, there was no longer just one king's sword, but thousands of them. They joined together in the air and constantly blocked the Vengeful Spirit King's escape route. Yu-Ting inherited the purity of Long Houchen's light attributability. Although the Vengeful Spirit King was strong, its attack power mainly came from its soul. As the Light Elf King, Yu-Ting's soul was extremely stable. Moreover, the body of Yi Queen that she had now was not her own. When she was originally a light elemental elf, it could be said that she was also in the form of soul. After fusing with the 2 divine swords, she had the ability to solidify her soul, which could be said to be a perfect counter to the Vengeful Spirit King's attack. In this way, Yu-Ting completely suppressed her opponent. The Vengeful Spirit King also tried to break through by splitting itself, but under the strangulation of the king's sword, it could not get close to Yu Ting's body at all. It could only keep dodging, which was really embarrassing. However, it had to be said that on the battlefield, apart from Long Haochen and Yu Ting who had the upper hand, the bright glimmer of Dawn Demon Hunt Squad's experts were being suppressed to varying degrees in all other aspects of the battle. Chuning was up against the Lich King. Both of them were good at summoning. In terms of domains, Chun-Ing, Beast God domain, could not suppress her opponent, but it could strengthen her summoned creatures. However, the undead summoned by the Lich King were superior to her summoned creatures in terms of grade. They occupied the largest space during the battle. On Chun-Ing's side, she had already summoned 36 Class 9 magical beasts to attack the Lich King through the enhancement of her domain. The Lich King did not show weakness either. Hundreds of Bone Dragon Legion attacked valiantly, suppressing Chun-Ing with their absolute advantage in numbers. Beside Chun-Ing, 6 orange-red epic-level crystal balls were constantly hovering and shining. The hundreds of elixirs on her Soul Saint garment were also emitting a strong light, helping her to restore her spiritual power. She had to complete the second mass summoning before the Bone Dragon Legion defeated her summoned creatures. The Lich King was not idle either. Offensive magic spells were constantly attacking Chun-Ing, but they were blocked by the heaven-defying demonic dragon that Madul had transformed into. Although he had the artifact, the gap between the two sides was too great. It was foreseeable that as long as the battle dragged on, Chun-Ing would definitely be defeated by the Lich King. Wang Yuanyuan's situation was not much better than Chun-Ing's. Her opponent was the Skeleton King. As soon as the battle began, the Skeleton King transformed into a huge black bone blade and launched a frenzied attack on Wang Yuanyuan with its absolute advantage in size. Wang Yuanyuan held the Divine Soul Shield in her left hand and Bloody Storm in her right hand. She resisted with all her might, but she was still losing ground. The Skeleton King's strength was too strong. Every time it attacked, Wang Yuanyuan would have retreated a few steps in the air. Wang Yuanyuan's blood domain was offset by the opponent's soul-devouring domain. It was a complete collision of strength between the two. If the Divine Soul Shield had not reached the level of immortal-grade equipment after being inlaid with space silver crystals and unleashed several powerful attacks in succession, perhaps Wang Yuanyuan would not have been able to resist. Even so, she still had to change her position through the spatial door and spiritual stove from time to time in order to mobilize the Skeleton King and prevent it from approaching Hao Yue. Rumble. An explosion was accompanied by a burst of intense purple lightning, illuminating one end of the battlefield in purple. That terrifying lightning had erupted from Sima Xian's vigorous ball of light. He held the vigorous ball of light with both hands and pressed the huge metal ball against his chest. Through the amplification of the vigorous ball of light, the attack power of the spiritual stove of purple godly thunder had also increased to an extremely terrifying level. 100 meters in front of him, the Abomination King, whose body was covered in pale white fat, lowered its head to look at its chest. In the middle of its chest, there was a charred wound with a diameter of several meters that went deep into the fat. One could even see its internal organs. Roar, roar, roar. The Abomination King hammered its chest with its left hand. In its right hand, a huge rusty iron hook was swung out. A crimson light came from the chain behind the iron hook and went straight for Sima Xian. Its hammering on its chest wasn't aimless. One could clearly see a large amount of disgusting yellow fat being squeezed out from the wound and completely covering the huge wound. Furthermore, the fat was healing the wound at an alarming rate. Damn it, I'm at a disadvantage. Sima Xian was also very depressed at this moment. He had found Abomination King because it looked big and should feel good fighting it. However, he hadn't expected to run into an iron plate. The Abomination King's defense was extremely terrifying. Sima Xian's vigorous ball of light had landed on it several times. The effects of the crushing, and triple explosion effects were extremely limited against the Abomination King. Even if the Abomination King's flesh was split open, its fat would recover in a very short period of time. Sima Xian had just tried using the spiritual stove of purple godly thunder. Although the damage was slightly greater, it still wasn't enough to heavily injure the Abomination King. What disgusted Sima Xian the most was the Abomination King's huge iron hook. Although the Abomination King was huge, it was very nimble when it controlled the iron hook, especially the red light on the iron hook. Once touched, it would immediately produce an absorption effect similar to the vigorous ball of light, making it difficult for Sima Xian to escape. If it wasn't for the special effects of his equipment, he would have been at a great disadvantage. Seeing the iron hook swing over again, Sima Xian snorted angrily and roared at the sky with a ferocious expression. The vigorous ball of light in his hand swept out. He was also infuriated when they clashed head-on. The two long-range heavy weapons collided in the air, causing countless sparks to explode. Be it in terms of size or weight, the vigorous ball of light didn't have the slightest advantage. However, it had already been upgraded to the epic stage, after all. The abilities it came with were incomparable to the Abomination King's iron hook. Explosions rang out one after another, and the iron hook was eventually deflected. Sima Xian flapped the wings on his back and flew higher. He glared at the Abomination King and said, "Aren't you just bigger than me and have a bigger weapon? Then I'll compete with you and see whose is bigger." As he spoke, Sima Xian tossed the vigorous ball of light in his hand up. A strange golden luster lit up from the core of the vigorous ball of light. This golden luster flickered with a faint rainbow color. Immortal? The vigorous ball of light had already been upgraded to the immortal stage. At the same time, Sima Xian's body also shone. With a shake of his body instantly expanded. In the blink of an eye, his height reached over 100 meters, comparable to the Abomination King. The most terrifying thing was that his vigorous ball of light had also increased in size. Its diameter seemed to be about 50 meters. The Abomination King looked at Sima Xian and then at the iron hook in his hand. He couldn't help but be stunned. He also felt a sense of danger. A ferocious glint flashed in his small eyes, and a dark green fog burst out of his body and quickly enveloped Sima Xian. This was his unique plague domain, and it was best at group battles. Experts of all attributes would be corroded by this plague. The longer it lasted, the stronger the corrosion would be. Sima Xian's eyes lit up. Facing the plague domain, he didn't dodge. He took a step forward, and the vigorous ball of light smashed towards the Abomination King. At the Monster Hunters Trading Center, Long Hao-Chen purchased 2 precious medicinal pills that could help a Type 9 powerhouse condense a domain. One was given to Sima Xian, and the other to Lin Xian. Lin Xian had already completed his Holy Sun domain. With the help of the little white flower, not only did Sima Xian's weapons improve, he had also cultivated his own domain. More accurately, it was a domain weapon, just like Yiting Long. He loved his vigorous ball of light too much. Hence, his domain had also evolved in accordance with his wishes. His body expanded, increasing his strength and defense. Coupled with the enhancement of the vigorous ball of light, the bald priest Sima Xian had basically transformed into a human-shaped murder weapon. There were flaws, too. He couldn't attack from afar, couldn't use any skills, and his spiritual power was being consumed very quickly. The two behemoths brazenly collided with each other, engaging in the simplest and most direct melee combat. Pa, 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 sounds of flesh colliding with flesh. One could even see the Hate Lord's fat splatter from time to time. On the entire battlefield, this battle could be considered a spectacle. On this side, it was a clash of bodies. On the other side, between Lin Xian and the underground cave magic spider monarch, it was a battle of magic against magic. The Holy Sun incantation hung high above his head. Lin Xian's 2 immortal-grade equipment shone brightly. Immortal dragon fire kept pointing forward, and the Holy Sun incantation kept spewing out powerful blue flames towards the underground cave magic spider monarch. After learning the Holy Sun incantation, it was like adding wings to a tiger for Lin Xian. Especially since the domain he cultivated was also based on the Holy Sun incantation, it raised this ultimate technique to an unprecedented level. The underground cave magic spider monarch's cultivation exceeded 300,000 spiritual energy points, and its tyrannical, poisonous, undead spells were quite powerful. However, flames had a certain restraint on undead, and the holy fires praised that Lin Xian war had light effects. Both sides were actually evenly matched. Moreover, Lin Xian seemed to have a slight advantage. His heart's flame was simply too high. In this world of black and red, Lin Xian's magic power recovery speed was also very fast. He attacked with all his might without caring about consumption, causing the underground cave magic spider monarch to be somewhat flustered. Similarly, evenly matched were the other two battlefields. Han Yu, who wore the throne of God of fear and sorrow and had the title of Knight of the Seal of Destruction and Forgiveness, was covered in dark green divine armor. His only weapon was a shield. There were two patterns on the dark green shield. One was a demon of fear, and the other was an angel of sorrow. His opponent was the zombie monarch. The zombie monarch's movements were inversely proportional to its stiff body. It was as fast as lightning, but no matter how it moved, Hanyu would always be able to block in front of it in time. Every time the zombie monarch's attack landed on the thick shield of fear and sorrow, its soul fire would violently tremble, and its body would inevitably slow down. Then, it would immediately be knocked away by Hanyu. Hanyu also did not take the initiative to attack, and only firmly defended, causing the zombie monarch to be completely helpless. Zhang Fangfang, who wore the throne of God of wisdom and spirit and had the title of Knight of the Seal of Education and Inheritance of Knights Templars, did exactly the same thing as Hanyu on the battlefield. Both of them were extremely stable knight. The throne of God of wisdom and spirit gave him a war hammer and a round shield. Every time the war hammer was swung, there would be an extremely strong explosion of light elements. The explosive power was even above that of the vigorous ball of light. The Hellfire Monarch's attacks were equally powerful, but under Zhang Fangfang's firm defense, it was unable to do anything. From the two battles between Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang, it could be seen how much the Throne of God had increased the knight's strength. Regardless of whether it was the Zombie Monarch or the Hellfire Monarch, they both had a cultivation of more than 300,000 spiritual energy points. Furthermore, they were both experts who excelled in close combat. However, in front of the two great Knight of the Seal, they were unable to take a single step forward. The battlefield was still barely able to maintain a balance, but once a gap appeared in this situation, it was very likely that it would be a complete defeat. This was especially true for the Light of Dawn monster hunters. After all, they were fighting in someone else's territory. In the distance, a large number of undead creatures were eyeing them covetously. After the Undead Judgment Knight and the Bone Dragon King attacked wildly for a while without any results, their attacks were somewhat restrained. Looking at Long Haochen, who was covered in a lustrous white armor, he couldn't help but feel a trace of helplessness. As the strongest king of this plane, he had been in control of everything here for thousands of years. This expert from another world in front of him had a lower cultivation than him, but his light attribute spiritual energy was terrifyingly pure. Furthermore, his equipment was made up of supreme artifacts. Unexpectedly, even a rank 9 expert like him couldn't see the limits of his strength. Long Haochen had been quietly comprehending the various enhancements that the eternal and creator throne of God had brought him. At the same time, his perception covered the entire battlefield, and he could clearly feel every change on the battlefield. After putting on the eternal armor, the Undead Judgment Knight and the Bone Dragon King could no longer give him any pressure. However, it wasn't easy for Long Haochen to defeat them either. The combined cultivation of these two kings was close to 1,000,000 spiritual energy points, and they were extremely powerful. Moreover, they probably hadn't used their full strength yet. Long Haochen's goal was only to ensure that Hao Yue completed his evolution, and he didn't want to risk his life against these undead lords. Therefore, preserving his strength and erupting at the critical moment was the right choice. He also had a backup plan that he hadn't used yet, but now wasn't the time to use it. After his companion's cultivation had risen to rank 9, they had gone through too little training. This kind of life and death battle was much more effective than the competition in the temple. At the same time, It could allow them to familiarize themselves with their new equipment. Therefore, Long Houchen wasn't in a hurry to use his full strength. With the existence of the instant flash domain and life-sharing soul chain, he wasn't worried that his companions' lives would be in danger. Hao Yue lay quietly on the hill. At this moment, it seemed as if all the vitality in his body had disappeared. The amethyst scales had also lost their usual dazzling luster. It just lay there quietly. Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi were the closest to Hao Yue. They had been paying attention to Hao Yue's changes. Although their cultivation had not broken through rank 9, they were still the strongest of the younger generation of Knights Templars. When their gazes fell on Hao Yue, they felt an indescribable fear. This seemingly calm Hao Yue seemed like a gradually forming black hole. Yang Wenjiao had tried to use his own senses to explore the state of Hao Yue. However, just as he started, he realized that his senses, which were connected to his soul, were about to be sucked away. He was so scared that he quickly withdrew his senses and didn't dare to explore anything anymore. Hao Yue's silence made Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi feel a great responsibility. No one knew how long this battle would last. Before Hao Yue finished evolving, the battle would continue. At the same time, both of them felt deeply ashamed. They wanted so much to appear on the battlefield in the sky and fight against the undead king. However, their strength was far from enough. The undead Judgment Knight's soul fire in his eye sockets was constantly pulsating, emitting a cold light. After he and the Bone Dragon King withdrew their attacks, his aura was slowly increasing. Long Houchen could feel that the next time he went all out, it would definitely be more ferocious than before. The undead Judgment Knight was waiting. He was waiting for the light of dawn monster hunters to show a weakness. As long as one of them was breached, they would have the overall advantage. Although Long Houchen had blocked him with a supreme artifact, the undead Judgment Knight had full confidence in his own strength. Even if he couldn't defeat Long Houchen at the critical moment, he could still restrain him. Among these powerhouses from the other world, only Long Houchen posed a real threat to him. As the undead Judgment Knight had predicted, a weakness had indeed appeared. The first to have a problem was Wang Yuanyuan. The Skeleton King's attack was extremely fierce. Its huge body didn't affect its movements at all. The black bone blade constantly transformed into black lightning in the air, attacking Wang Yuanyuan. Wang Yuanyuan was also good at attacking, not defending. Therefore, when she released her blood realm, she could only attack the opponent. Gotcha! The black bone saber transformed into a black lightning bolt in the air, heavily chopping towards Wang Yuanyuan. Wang Yuanyuan didn't dare to use the relatively weak Sanguine Storm to block it. She swept the divine soul shield in her left hand horizontally, instantly colliding with the black bone saber. The divine soul shield, which was inlaid with 7 empty silver crystals, could fully display its power. When it collided with the enemy's attack, it could erupt with a layer of spatial turbulence to resist the opponent's attack. However, it was different this time. The Skeleton Sovereign King's attack was clearly premeditated. The moment his black bone blade bounced off the divine giant soul shield, the bone blade suddenly became illusory. It flickered 3 times in a row at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye, and another 3 blades fiercely stomped on the divine giant soul shield. Wang Yuanyuan let out a muffled groan. She could no longer withstand this terrifying attack. Her entire body fell from the sky and fell to the ground. The Skeleton King didn't let her off. His figure flashed and caught up with Wang Yuanyuan in midair. A thick layer of black instantly rose from his feet and finally completely concentrated on the bone blade. At this moment, the color of his originally dark bones seemed to have faded a bit. Only the black bone blade exuded a color like the abyss. At this time, Wang Yuanyuan's left arm was in pain, and the blood in her body was surging. The Skeleton King had obviously been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. While accumulating power on the bone blade, his own domain was fully activated. He didn't hesitate to consume a large amount of spiritual power to lock Wang Yuanyuan, causing the opening of her spiritual stove to delay. In this way, There was no other way for Wang Yuanyuan to block it. Wang Yuanyuan clenched her teeth, and her heart was filled with unwillingness. She knew that she couldn't block this attack no matter what. Although Long Haochen would definitely save her, how could she be willing to let a gap appear on her side? The pitch-black bone blade silently swept through the air like a ghost. At this moment, a golden figure suddenly appeared in front of Wang Yuanyuan without warning. A strong aura of light instantly erupted, turning into 12 golden lightning bolts that bombarded the black bone blade. Boom! A legendary-level golden shield in the golden figure's hand blocked the bone saber's descent after 12 golden lightning bolts struck it. An intense golden light flickered on his body, and the bone saber was deflected. However, the giant shield in the golden figure's hand also turned into powder. A piece of legendary-level equipment had been damaged just like that. This golden figure was the avatar of Zhang Fangfang's second spiritual stove of life. Zhang Fangfang had been paying attention to the situation on Wang Yuanyuan's side on the battlefield. With the help of the Throne of God, he was able to resist his opponent. He had long seen the crisis on Wang Yuanyuan's side. At this critical moment, he decisively released his avatar and rushed over with his giant shield. The 12 Light of Judgment just now had been prepared for a long time, and it happened to save Wang Yuanyuan. Yuan Yuan, accumulate power. Zhang Fangfang's voice rang in her ears. The avatar's body was already flashing with golden light, and it brazenly rushed towards the Skeleton King, launching a counterattack with all its might. With the increase in cultivation, the spiritual stove also evolved. Zhang Fangfang's second spiritual stove of life had evolved to the peak. Now, his avatar could now have 90% of his cultivation, and it could last for 4 hours. At the same time, it could also wear other equipment, but it could not inherit the abilities of Zhang Fangfang's equipment. However, an avatar was an avatar after all. Zhang Fangfang had to split his attention to control it, and it was a bit difficult to block the Inferno King's attack. However, he focused on defense and did not seek to make any mistakes. He finally made up for the gap on Wang Yuanyuan's side. Wang Yuanyuan and Zhang Fangfang had been together for a long time, and she immediately understood what he meant. She did not attack together with the avatar, but focused on recovering her spiritual power. At the same time, she raised the giant soul god shield in her hand high up. A silvery white light began to spread from under Wang Yuanyuan's feet and slowly rose up. Her entire body was burning with a layer of silvery white flames. What was even more strange was that her eyes were actually blood red, and the blood-red light flickered like 2 rubies. Under the silvery white halo, she looked even more ferocious. How could Wang Yuanyuan have a nickname of the Bloody War Goddess for nothing? After suffering a great loss at the hands of the Skeleton King, the unyielding fighting spirit in her heart was completely aroused. The silvery white, spatial spiritual power became stronger and stronger. Wang Yuanyuan suddenly looked up to the sky and screamed. The blood-red color in her eyes instantly burst forth, turning into 2 rays of blood-red light that shot into the sky. In the void, a silver door of light opened under the illumination of the blood-red light. Then, thousands of rays of silver light erupted from Wang Yuanyuan's body. The strong spatial fluctuations caused everything around Wang Yuanyuan's body to look distorted. Only the 2 rays of blood-red light that rose into the sky spread out when they came into contact with the silver door of space, turning into a layer of blood-red light that fell down. Wang Yuanyuan's right foot suddenly stomped on the ground, and the scream from her mouth became even more intense. She raised the giant soul god shield in her left hand high up, and a layer of fine blood-red veins crawled over the giant shield like blood vessels.